Hi guys. Tonight we drift out onto the open prairie, where the air feels so sharp it almost rings against your cheeks, and the horizon stretches so far that even the stars look lonely. You step into that stillness now, listening to the faint crunch of frost under your boots, feeling how the cold slides silently inside your coat no matter how tightly you wrap it. It already hints at how rough a cowboy's night could be, and as you settle in, you get the sense that you probably will not survive this kind of cold for more than a few hours, let alone a whole season. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are at it, tell me your location and the time where you are watching from. Now, dim the lights. You step deeper into the wild silence of a freezing range night. The dim glow of distant starlight barely outlines the rolling land, and each breath you take fogs into a small passing cloud. The chill pulses against your skin in a slow, deliberate rhythm. You feel it in your fingers first, then your toes, then the small gap at the collar of your coat where the wind slips in with a kind of smug confidence. This is the setting where cowboys carved out their sleep, night after night, across thousands of miles of open country. You stand where the grass stiffens into icy bristles beneath your boots. The cattle herd lies scattered across the darkness, broad shapes rising like low mounds against the ground. They groan and shuffle now and then. That sound, soft and uneven, carries across the open land and blends with the distant yips of coyotes. All of it melts together into a single long whisper that wraps around you. You might be tired from a day in the saddle, but something in the air warns you that this night is not granting comfort easily. You crouch beside the weathered canvas of a bedroll, stiff with frost, and run your hand across the fabric. It feels like cold stone at first. Cowboys often called it their home because it was the only shelter they carried. A mainstream historical fact slips in here. By the late 19th century, most working cowboys relied on a combination of canvas and wool blankets, rolled tightly and slung behind the saddle, to handle cold nights. It was a simple system, but out here simple meant dependable. You unbuckle the straps. The roll unfurls with a slow sigh, releasing trapped dust, old smoke, and a hint of horse sweat. The wind catches the edge of your coat and tugs. You turn your face slightly, bracing. The horizon glimmers with that strange silver glow that often appears in winter plains at night. It is not moonlight exactly, more like the reflection of cold air rolling across the land. You feel your shoulders instinctively rise, as if you are preparing for a test. A fringe tidbit comes to life here. Some old cowhands swore that frost had a smell, claiming they could scent incoming lows by the sharp, metallic tang that hit their nose hours before the temperature dropped. You inhale deeply, wondering if you can catch it. Maybe there is something there, or maybe the cold is playing tricks on you already. You lower yourself onto the canvas and feel the ground's hardness radiating upward. It is remarkable how quickly the earth drains warmth. You shift your weight, feeling every ridge of frozen soil pressing through the fabric. Cowboys quickly learned that the ground itself was the real enemy. Not the air, not the wind, the earth. The cold seeped efficiently from below, crawling steadily up the spine no matter how many blankets lay between. Historians still argue whether cowboys during the peak cattle drive era learned this technique from indigenous tribes who had long traditions of choosing raised, dry spots for sleeping in winter. Some say yes, others say the habit emerged naturally. Either way, you can feel why something so specific mattered. A few inches of elevation could mean a few hours of survival. You stare into the darkness and listen to the wind humming against tufts of grass. The world looks endless, but right now, you notice tiny details. The glittering frost on a coiled rope, the slow sway of your horse, half asleep, the faint glow of cooling embers from the earlier fire. The cowboy way of resting was not about comfort. It was about training your mind to accept the unavoidable, to rest inside hardship, to let your muscles drop into a half-numb state without panicking. You settle deeper into the blankets, They feel rough against your skin. Wool scratches a little, but it also traps heat better than anything else a rider could carry. You tuck the edges around your shoulders, creating a cocoon that captures every scrap of body warmth. Your breath softens. You feel your heartbeat slow. The wind becomes a kind of lullaby, even though it is trying to freeze every part of you. Many accounts from the era describe cowboys sliding into sleep with one ear open, trained to catch the sound of a stirring herd. You imagine yourself doing the same, listening for any change in rhythm. The cattle need constant awareness, even when your eyes begin to close. As you lie there, you feel the strange intimacy of sleeping under open sky. The stars look ridiculously bright, sharp as tiny needles, and they feel closer than they do in any town. The night seems to press down, not in a suffocating way, but in a heavy, enveloping way that makes your breath sound louder than it should. You take another slow inhale and realize something unusual. Your body is beginning to acclimate. The cold hurts less. The stiffness becomes familiar. It is not comfort, but it is something like acceptance. Your horse shifts again. The soft thud of its hoof against frozen dirt pulls your attention. That steady animal presence has always been part of cowboy rest. You find yourself grateful for it, even though it is simply grazing or dozing. Out here, companionship often takes the form of whatever can stand the cold beside you. You nestle deeper into your role, feeling how the layers of canvas, hide, and wool begin to work together. The first few minutes are the hardest. After that, the system becomes surprisingly effective. You understand why cowboys trusted it. It is heavy, cumbersome, and smells faintly like old smoke, but it keeps you alive. A small shiver moves through you, but it fades quickly. The darkness feels a little softer now. You hear cattle settling. You hear nothing dangerous, just the wide, cold quiet of the western night. And you begin to drift, not fully asleep yet, but drifting, letting the range cradle you the way it did for countless riders who came before. You let the dim glow of the stars fade from your awareness as the last warmth of the campfire dwindles behind you. The glow had been a small, brave circle in the darkness earlier, but now it has settled into a nest of dying embers. You can almost hear the faint tick of cooling wood. It feels like the fire is sighing itself to sleep. Your body shifts reluctantly away from that memory of heat, and the cold slides back in, as if it had just been waiting politely for its turn. You move slowly, feeling every inch of temperature change, and it makes you understand why cowboys guarded firelight as if it were a precious animal. The cold deepens as you leave that fading halo behind. It gathers around your shoulders first, then slips down your arms, then nestles into the folds of your clothes. You notice how your breath thickens in front of your face, drifting upward like slow smoke. Even though the night is still, the air has weight. It presses against your cheeks, presses against your chest, presses into your gloves. You crouch to brush a little frost from your sleeve. The crystals scatter instantly, catching what little starlight remains. Cowboys faced this scene countless times, and each time they made the same mental calculation. Do you stay near the fire, risking sparks catching in dry grass or alerting rustlers or predators with the glow? Or do you step away and let darkness swallow everything? For many cattle drives, the answer was simple. Flames were a liability. Even on frigid nights, cowboys often let them die down until only soft red coals remained. A mainstream historical fact adds itself here. Many trail bosses in the late 19th century prohibited large fires during active drives unless weather demanded it, because the light could scatter the herd or attract unwanted eyes. It was a matter of caution, not comfort. You settle into the shadows now, feeling how different the world becomes without that friendly circle of warmth. It is surprising how much noise disappears. Without crackling wood, without the subtle pop of sap, you start to hear things you had not noticed before. The quiet rustle of a distant steer rubbing against a bush, the soft groan of leather as your horse shifts its weight, the steady hum of wind weaving through dry grass. It forms a small orchestra that only the cold can conduct. You sit down, adjusting the layers of your blanket and coat. The canvas bedroll you unfurled earlier rests behind you, still holding the warmth of your body. You lean back onto it. The cold ground pushes through, but the fabric between you and the earth works hard to hold the heat you earned. Cowboys developed a strange relationship with fire, warmth, and darkness. They learned to treat each with respect, but also with an attitude that feels almost sarcastic. If the night wanted to freeze them, fine. Let it try. The body adapts faster than pride does. A fringe tidbit slips in here to keep you company. Some cowboys insisted that the best way to stay warm at night was not by hugging the fire, but by eating something greasy before bed. Bacon, beans with lard, even cold biscuits soaked in fat. They believed that the slow burn of heavy food kept the body warmer through the night. Whether it worked or not is still debated. You imagine chewing a tough strip of bacon now, the salt stinging your lip, wondering if it could possibly help against the kind of cold that seems to have patience carved into its bones. You adjust again, shifting your weight so the canvas does not bite quite so sharply. The last flicker of your earlier fire glints weakly. It is tempting to rebuild it. All you would need is a little dry grass, a spark, a few twigs, but something stops you. A note of cowboy instinct, perhaps, whispering that darkness is safer. Historians still argue whether cowboys avoided bright flames mainly for herd psychology or primarily for fear of bandits and raiding parties. Some accounts favor one explanation, some the other. Maybe both are true. Out here, every choice pulled double duty. The herd murmurs again, a rippling hush that sweeps across the plains like a slow wave. You turn your head to listen. Those sounds become your safety net. They tell you that the cattle are calm, which means predators are distant, and no spooked animal is about to cause a stampede. This natural rhythm was one of the reasons cowboys could sleep at all. You can feel yourself tuning into it, matching your breath to the slow lull of the animals. It creates a kind of half-meditation, a trance born out of exhaustion and trust. The cold tries once more to get your attention. It tugs at your fingertips, then your jaw. You rub your hands together slowly. The friction builds a tiny pocket of warmth. You hold it close, savoring it. Cowboys often said that the trick was not to fight the cold aggressively, but to let your body settle into a calm, balanced state. Panic wastes energy. Anger wastes breath. Stillness keeps heat where it matters. You watch the remaining glow from the fire give its last faint wink. Now everything around you becomes shapes, outlines, and shadows. You shift to lie back fully on the roll, pulling the wool blanket up to your chin. The scratchiness feels strangely comforting. You tuck your feet in tight, creating small pockets of trapped heat at the bottom. Your shoulders relax. You feel your spine ease. The night grows enormous. You stare straight up at the sky. Stars scatter themselves across the darkness, each one impossibly bright. They do not twinkle as much as you expect. They just hold themselves steady, patient, watchful. You imagine cowboys staring at these same stars, feeling the same stillness, letting the same cold settle around them as they drifted off. You breathe in. The air is shockingly crisp, almost sweet. You breathe out. It curls into a faint cloud that vanishes immediately. Your eyelids grow heavier with each slow breath. The cattle keep murmuring. The grass keeps rustling. The night keeps pressing its cold hands gently around you. Even the absence of fire becomes soothing. It is as if the darkness itself agrees to watch over you for a few hours. And you begin to drift, easing into the long, frozen quiet that has cradled cowboys for generations. You return to the bedroll now, letting the night settle around your shoulders like an old, familiar weight. The wind has quieted, not out of kindness, but out of the strange rhythm that winter nights follow on the open plains. It rises, then rests, then rises again. Right now you catch one of those rare resting moments. The air hangs still, frosted and crisp, and you feel every breath like a slow ribbon unwinding inside your chest. This is the perfect time to understand the strange wisdom tucked inside the cowboy bedroll, that simple bundle of canvas and wool that carried entire histories of trial and error. You kneel beside it, feeling the stiff ridge of the rolled fabric push against your palm. The canvas is coated with dust, hardened by old snow, and holds the faint scent of smoke. Cowboys trusted this bundle more than any roof they rarely slept under. It was their mattress, their blanket, their shelter, their traveling companion, and sometimes the only thing standing between their bodies and a night that wanted nothing more than to steal their heat. You loosen the ties and unroll it fully, hearing the soft flop of wool hitting the frozen ground. You run your hand across the blanket. It is rough, scratchy, and oddly comforting. The coarse texture feels alive. A mainstream historical fact helps anchor this moment. By the late 19th century, the classic cowboy bedroll had become standardized across the West. It usually consisted of 2 wool blankets wrapped inside a heavy canvas sheet, all rolled tight and tied with leather straps. The wool provided warmth even when damp. The canvas blocked wind and kept out snow. This design came partly from military roll systems used in earlier frontier campaigns. Cowboys adapted it, toughened it, and swore by it for generations. You feel that practicality now. It is simple. It works. And out here, anything that works becomes sacred. You lower yourself onto the wool, bracing for the cold that waits beneath. It greets you immediately, rising from the ground in a slow, patient wave. The bedroll helps, but the earth is always persistent. You shift, trying to distribute your weight so the cold cannot concentrate in one spot. Cowboys learned this movement instinctively. Shift slightly, reposition your hip, wiggle your toes, pull your knees in. All tiny motions, all meant to maintain circulation and keep one step ahead of the cold that wants to settle deep into the bones. You lie back fully, letting the canvas fold around your shoulders. It rustles quietly. In the shadows, it almost feels like a protective shell. The sky stretches above you, deep and endless, and for a moment you imagine the countless riders who lay in this exact position before you. Men who spent weeks trailing cattle, fighting storms, humming quietly to keep the herd calm. They all slept on these same layers. They all respected the wool and the canvas the way you do now. A fringe tidbit floats through your mind. Some cowboys believed that sleeping with their boots still on helped trap heat and keep toes from freezing. Others insisted boots should come off because the straps and stiff leather cut off circulation during the coldest hours. This disagreement became a running joke among trail crews. One camp accused the other of being reckless, while the other camp accused the first of being delicate. The truth is somewhere in the middle. You glance at your own boots and imagine debating yourself about whether to keep them on. For now, you relax your ankles, letting your feet settle gently inside the cool leather. The night deepens around you. The air seems to thicken. The cold becomes quieter but also more intimate, sliding across your cheeks like the edge of polished stone. You pull the top layer of the bedroll higher, tucking it under your chin. Your fingers brush the canvas, feeling its coarse grain. It is amazing how such an ordinary material becomes a kind of barrier against the western winter. Cowboys sometimes slept in blizzards with only the bedroll for cover, curling inside it like a cocoon, until morning sun finally thawed their joints enough to move again. Your breathing narrows into a slow rhythm. The cold is still there, but it becomes a background presence. What stands out now are the textures and layers, the wool that scratches your neck, the canvas that rustles softly each time you shift, the faint warmth slowly gathering in the nest you created. Cowboys talked often about this moment. That small window when your body finally warms the space inside the roll and creates a tiny sanctuary. If you miss that window or fail to settle right, the night becomes a long fight. But if you catch it, if you relax at the right time, the cold becomes manageable, almost gentle. Historians still argue whether the precise design of the cowboy bedroll was originally influenced by earlier Navajo and Apache sleeping bundles or developed independently by trail crews who had no exposure to those indigenous systems. Some researchers point out similarities in layering methods. Others insist that cowboys built their own version from purely practical necessity. You lie there, imagining both possibilities overlapping on the same cold ground, both shaped by survival, both teaching you something about sleep in a place that does not favor weakness. Your horse shifts nearby. The soft jingle of tack brushes your ears. That sound feels grounding. Cowboys rarely slept far from their horses. A bedroll was always laid close enough to hear the animal breathe. You turn your head slightly in the darkness and listen. A slow exhale, a gentle stomp, a rustle of mane. That steady presence tells you the world is quiet, safe enough for rest. The horse would react before you could, and you trust that instinct as much as cowboys did. The cold brushes your cheek again, and you tuck your chin deeper into the wool. You adjust your legs so the blanket wraps more tightly around your knees. Warmth builds slowly. You exhale a little sigh, the kind that releases tension. Cowboys often joked that the first sigh meant your body had accepted defeat and was ready to sleep wherever it landed. Toughness only gets you so far. After that, you let the bedroll do the real work. You let your hands rest on your stomach. Your fingers curl slightly, hidden under the layers. The wool scratches lightly against your skin, and you let that texture soothe you. It is strange, but even discomfort can be comforting when the body is exhausted enough. Cowboys worked long days. 14 hours in the saddle was common, sometimes more. By nightfall, their bodies were so used up that even the hardest ground felt like a luxury. You sense that exhaustion now, the kind that wraps itself around you like a heavy blanket of its own. The night pulses with soft sounds. A distant owl hoots. The cattle shuffle and breathe. Wind skims along the grass, just enough to create a faint hiss. The stars above remain steady. You let these details drift across your mind like slow-moving clouds. Nothing is threatening. Nothing requires action. Everything can wait. You stretch one foot slightly to feel the bottom of the roll. It has already warmed from your body heat. The warmth feels like a small victory, something cowboys appreciated far more than most modern sleepers would understand. You nestle into it. The blanket holds you. The canvas shields you. The world softens. Slowly your thoughts begin to loosen. The cold, once sharp, becomes muted. The stars blur a little. Your breath falls into an easy rhythm. You feel yourself drifting in a way that feels almost slow motion. Cowboys often slipped into this half-sleep state before fully letting go, a space where their bodies rested but their ears stayed alert. You enter that space now, feeling yourself sink deeper into the wool. The bedroll creaks softly as you shift, and you let your eyes fall shut. The cold is still here, but no longer combative. It simply exists beside you. The wool grows warmer. The canvas becomes your shelter. Your muscles soften. The quiet of the range folds itself around your shoulders. And you sink, inch by inch, into the cocoon of cowboy sleep, learning the steady, patient art of surviving the cold, with nothing more than canvas, wool, and the resolve to rest anyway. You step away from the quiet comfort of your warmed bedroll, and let your eyes adjust to the subtle gradients of shadows stretching across the prairie. The night deepens, but your attention shifts downward now, toward the ground itself. Cold air can be endured with enough layers. Wind can be dodged with clever positioning. But the earth is the real judge of your sleep. And tonight, you learn the strange art that cowboys practiced every evening, choosing the right patch of land to spend hours lying on a world that often seemed determined to freeze them from below. You lower yourself to a crouch, letting your palm hover just above the soil. Even without touching it, you can feel the cold radiating upward like a slow breath. You brush your fingers lightly over the top layer. The dirt is crisp, brittle, and slightly powdery from frost. The Wild West looked vast and chaotic, but cowboys treated the ground like a map full of clues. They checked for dips, ridges, wet spots, animal trails, and wind channels with the same attention a sailor gives the sea. Tonight you imitate that patient scanning. A detail widely confirmed in frontier records helps shape what you see. Riders routinely avoided low-lying ground because cold air pools in dips and hollows, settling like invisible water. Even a difference of a few feet could mean the difference between waking stiff or waking numb. You straighten your back and scan the area with new eyes. That slight rise over there could keep your spine from freezing. That gentle slope could catch the wind in the wrong direction. Cowboys learned this instinctively, after countless nights spent regretting poorly chosen spots. You take a few steps toward a cluster of dried sagebrush. The plants rustle faintly, carrying a scent that feels dusty and herbal. You touch one, letting its branches scratch lightly against your glove. Cowboys often used shrubs as mini barriers, settling down on the lee side so the branches could cut wind. The trick was to find one large enough to help, but not so alive that you risked sharing your sleeping space with hidden rattlesnakes or insects. You give the bush a gentle kick, more out of habit than fear. Nothing stirs. A peculiar little anecdote circulates through cowboy lore. Some riders claim they could judge the warmth of a spot by the behavior of grasshoppers at dusk. If the insects gathered thick on a patch of ground before nightfall, cowboys believed that spot held heat better than the surrounding soil. Whether this trick ever truly worked is anyone's guess, but it became one of those funny, half-believed survival methods shared around campfires. You look around now, half expecting a stray grasshopper, though none appear in this biting cold. You kneel again, running your hand through the sparse grass. The blades are stiff and icy. They crunch softly against your fingers. The ground beneath feels uneven, as if the winter has tightened it like a drum. Cowboys would test spots just like this, sometimes lying flat for a few seconds to check whether the cold grasped too aggressively from below. You lower your palm again. The ground is harsh, but tolerable. Not far from you, your horse shifts, exhaling a slow plume of white vapor into the darkness. You glance over at its silhouette. Horses often served as wind indicators long before a cowboy felt the breeze himself. If the animal turned its hindquarters against the gusts, you knew which direction the air planned to move. You subconsciously change your angle, aligning your future sleeping spot so the wind will hit your back rather than your face. Cowboys made these subtle adjustments every night, hardly thinking about them. A topic that continues to cause disagreement among researchers comes to mind as you study the Earth again. Some experts argue that cowboys borrowed much of their ground selection strategy from observing local tribes who had perfected winter sleeping techniques over centuries. Others propose that the knowledge developed independently, as any group living outdoors long enough would reach the same conclusions. No final answer satisfies everyone, but standing here, you understand why the debate persists. The harshness of the land forces creativity. Many cultures could arrive at similar solutions. You take a few slow steps, testing soil texture with your boots. One patch feels slightly softer, another is too rocky. A third holds the faintest whisper of moisture when you press your foot down. Moisture means cold. Cold means misery. You step away from it immediately. Cowboys were extremely cautious about damp soil. Even a little dampness sank through blankets during the night, turning sleep into a shivering, half-conscious fight. You feel a small shudder imagining it. You wander closer to a fallen log lying at a gentle angle. The wood is pale, stripped by weather and sun. You run your hand across it, feeling the grain push back against your glove. Fallen logs offered shelter from wind, and sometimes provided a barrier against drifting snow. Cowboys rarely slept directly against them, because insects like to claim such places, but setting a bedroll near one could calm the wind enough to make a real difference. Your breath fogs again, thicker now. The cold nudges at your ears. You rub your hands together, creating a small pocket of warmth. You step lightly around the area, imagining where a cowboy might position himself. You picture him dragging his roll into a narrow strip beside a rock, using the stone as a shield. You imagine him choosing the space between two bushes so the wind funnels above rather than through him. You finally settle on a spot, slightly raised, dry. shielded by the faint curvature of the land. You kneel and press your palm flat against the earth. It is still cold, of course, but the chill is not aggressive here, more like a quiet presence than a biting force. This is where the cowboy version of logic played out. The perfect sleeping ground was never comfortable by modern standards. It was simply the least terrible option. You sit back on your heels and inhale slowly, letting the scents of dust, winter grass, and faint horse sweat drift into your lungs. The cold scratches your throat a little. You exhale carefully. The earth beneath you holds no warmth, but it also offers no malicious surprises. That is enough. You let yourself ease down onto your side for a moment, testing the fit of your body against the ground. Your shoulder protests. Your hip feels the hardness immediately. You shift. You adjust the angle of your knee. You adjust the tilt of your foot. The movement becomes a negotiation. Cowboys negotiated like this nightly, asking the ground for just enough tolerance to fall asleep without freezing solid. Your ear presses close to the earth for a moment, and you hear something faint, a distant thud, maybe a slow hoofbeat from another horse in the herd, or the quiet shifting of a steer settling in for the night. Sounds travel oddly through solid ground. Cowboys used those subtle vibrations as an early warning system long before the eye caught movement. You sit back up, brushing frost from your sleeve. The sky above is tranquil now, painted with dim starlight that feels softer than earlier. You take in the entire scene, the shrubs whispering quietly, the untouched frost clinging to grass, the herd breathing in slow waves, your horse standing patiently waiting for whatever comes next. Everything feels connected by the same thread of cold and survival. And now that the ground has been chosen, the rest of the night can unfold. The cowboy way begins here, in this careful, deliberate conversation with the earth. You feel your body preparing for the stillness ahead. You pull your blanket closer around your shoulders. You breathe again, deeper this time. The prairie watches silently, waiting as you settle into the next part of the long, frozen night. You ease back toward your chosen patch of ground, letting the cold wrap around your legs while your attention shifts to one of the strangest, most iconic cowboy habits, using the saddle as a pillow. It sits where you left it earlier, resting in the dim starlight like a small hill of leather and iron. You approach it with the slow confidence of someone who has already accepted that comfort is a luxury, not a guarantee. As you stand over it, the smell of oiled hide rises faintly into the air, warm and earthy, a memory of sunlight and long hours on horseback. You lower yourself to one knee beside it. The saddle creaks softly under your touch, stiff from the night chill. You run your gloved fingers along the seat, feeling the solid construction. Cowboys carried almost nothing unnecessary, and the saddle was one of the few pieces of equipment built with pure durability in mind. It was not soft. It was not forgiving, but it was their one reliable support structure, on the trail and off it. According to descriptions preserved in many old ranch journals, riders habitually used the saddle under their head because its high cantle kept the neck aligned and elevated, preventing cold air from sinking straight into the spine. You test that idea by lifting the saddle slightly. Even in the dim light, it gives the impression of sturdiness, as if carved more from stubbornness than material. You shift the saddle near your bedroll and angle it so the horn points faintly upward at an angle that feels natural. To modern eyes, this would look ridiculous, but to a cowboy, this setup made perfect sense. You sit down beside it, pressing your palm against the leather. The cold pushes back first, then slowly retreats as your body heat spreads across the surface. The smell becomes clearer now, tinged with sweat, horsehair, dust, and old trails. It is strangely grounding. A curious little story often told in frontier saloons comes to mind. Some cowboys swore that sleeping with their head on the saddle helped them stay alert because the leather transmitted vibrations from the ground more easily. If a stray steer kicked up dirt or a predator prowled nearby, the faint tremor would travel straight into the sleeper's skull, waking him before danger grew serious. Whether this was an exaggeration or a genuine technique varies depending on who you ask, but it is one of those small, rugged superstitions that fit the cowboy image perfectly. You lean down now, resting your cheek lightly against the saddle for a moment to test the feel. The surface is firm, unyielding, but supportive. The angle lifts your head high enough that your blanket can tuck around your shoulders without sliding. Cowboys counted on this positioning to trap heat better. If the shoulders exposed themselves to the night breeze, warmth leaked out fast. You feel how the saddle helps prevent that. As you shift again, adjusting your weight, a thought passes through your mind, echoing the disagreements of many researchers who study frontier life. Some propose that this pillow technique originated from Spanish vaqueros, whose saddles were taller and naturally shaped for head support during rest. Others argue that American cowboys simply adopted the habit independently after long nights of improvising comfort wherever possible. There is no single answer that satisfies every viewpoint. You sense the ambiguity, and it feels fitting. The West was built on improvisation, not standard instruction. You slide your blanket closer, pulling it over your chest as you settle your head fully against the curved leather. A small jolt of cold snakes up the back of your neck at first. You grit your teeth, then relax. Slowly, the surface warms. You feel your muscles settle into the shape of the saddle's arch, and the lines of tension tucked into your neck ease away. Your horse stands a few steps away, watching you with a sleepy curiosity. The animal's warm breath drifts in soft puffs. The faint jingle of its bridle reminds you that cowboys rarely felt alone, even in the vast emptiness of the plains. The saddle under your head carries not just your weight but the memory of countless miles traveled together. This connection anchors you. You stretch your legs, letting your boots rest near the lower edge of the roll. The cold nips at your toes, but the thick wool inside your socks traps enough heat to push back. You shift your shoulders, letting the blanket settle more snugly around your jawline. The saddle keeps your head elevated, preventing cold air from sinking into the hollows of your collar. The prairie hums quietly. A steer snorts in the distance. Another shuffles, kicking up a tiny flutter of frost. The sound travels across the plain like a slow ripple. Your eyes grow heavy, but you remain aware. Cowboys always slept in a half-ready state, bodies exhausted but minds sensitive to shifts in noise. You feel that same alertness now. The saddle's horn presses near your temple, solid and cool. Cowboys sometimes tuck their hats over the horn while sleeping, letting the brim act as a shade against moonlight or early dawn. You try that motion now. Your hat hangs loosely over the horn, tilting just enough to block the brightest stars from shining directly into your eyes. A soft darkness settles. Your breath slows, warm against the cold air as it escapes your nose. The blanket muffles the faint crackle of frost catching in the wind. You close your eyes gently, feeling the odd comfort of such a firm pillow. Cowboys preferred this solidity. Softness often meant dampness, and dampness meant misery. A saddle never got damp unless the world drowned in rain. On dry nights like this one, it was dependable. You tighten your arms around your chest, feeling your body sinking deeper into the small warmth pocket now forming around you. The saddle supports your head at just the right angle, letting your neck unclench. Your spine begins to settle. Your knees relax. Your jaw loosens. Every few seconds, your horse exhales. Each breath reassures you. Nothing is stirring in the dark except a few lazy cattle. Silence spreads gently across the land. You breathe again, long and slow. The saddle seems to cradle the base of your skull just enough to keep you steady. You feel the strange intimacy of trusting an object so rough and utilitarian to carry you into sleep. Cowboys often joked that their saddle knew them better than their own families. After long nights like this, you understand why. Your body continues to relax. Your hands grow warmer under the blanket. Your breath falls into a steady rhythm. The sky above seems to dim even without clouds. You let your head sink a little deeper into the leather curve, feeling the last tension slide away. The night grows still. The cold steadies, and the saddle becomes not just a tool but a quiet companion, easing you into the long hours ahead. You shift your weight slightly, letting the saddle settle more warmly beneath your head, and your attention drifts to the blankets wrapped around your torso. The wool presses against your skin with a stubborn firmness, scratchy but steady, like an old friend who refuses to soften but never lets you down. Tonight the cold feels deeper, creeping along the ground in a slow crawl, and you begin to appreciate just how much a cowboy depended on every fiber woven into his bedding. You draw the top blanket closer to your chin. The wool carries the scent of smoke, sweat, and a faint hint of animal musk that came from weeks on the trail. It is not unpleasant. In fact, it feels oddly reassuring, as if every layer has gathered a little warmth from all the men who slept before you. Cowboys rarely washed their blankets, not because they enjoyed grime, but because the natural oils in wool repelled moisture far better when undisturbed. You run your fingers along the edge, feeling its rugged surface. The warmth it gives is slow, steady, and honest. A fact widely taught in frontier history helps shape what you feel now. Wool blankets were prized above almost any other piece of gear. They could insulate even when damp, a trait that saved countless riders from freezing after river crossings or sudden storms. Thick buffalo robes, when available, added an even richer layer of insulation. Early accounts describe cowboys trading almost anything except their horse to get a quality robe during winter drives. You understand the desperation behind that now, with the cold nipping through even your heaviest layer when the wind shifts. You adjust your position so the blanket forms a sealed cocoon around your shoulders. It rustles slightly, and the sound merges with the faint hum of the prairie. Your horse paws the ground nearby, then settles again. A moment later, a new scent slips into the air, something earthy, slightly musky. You reach for the second blanket at your feet and lift it closer to inspect its dense weave. Tucked inside is a lining made from buffalo hair, thick and coarse. Cowboys added these linings to blunt the worst winter nights. Buffalo hair traps heat the way few natural fibers can, creating pockets of warm air between each stiff strand. A small, curious story rises from memory. Some old trail riders insisted that sleeping wrapped in buffalo hide invited more vivid dreams, claiming the material carried the spiritual weight of the plains. They said the dreams could warn a man about trouble ahead, or remind him to check his herd before dawn. Whether you believe in such things or not, you cannot deny that the blanket carries a presence. It feels heavier than wool, older somehow, as if holding the echoes of a world that existed long before fences cut the land into neat shapes. You nestle deeper, pressing your cheek against the warm interior. The heat builds slowly, spreading across your chest and down your arms. The cold still presses at the edges, but your blankets form a barrier strong enough to make the night feel survivable. Your mind wanders to a long-standing scholarly disagreement about winter gear on the open range. Some researchers argue that cowboy bedding practices were heavily influenced by fur trading communities in the Northern Territories, who perfected the layering of hides and wool for sub-zero conditions. Others suggest that cowboys simply learned through hard experience and adapted whatever they could get their hands on. There is no firm consensus, and perhaps that mystery adds to the myth of cowboy resilience. You breathe in again, letting the warmth settle around your ribs as you imagine both cultures crossing paths on lonely plains. You tuck your knees slightly toward your chest, creating a small cradle of warmth that spreads quickly through your legs. The blanket brushes against the rough fabric of your trousers, and the friction generates a soft heat. Your boots stay close to the edge of the roll, collecting just enough trapped air to keep your toes from numbing. You flex your feet inside the leather, feeling blood circulate again. The range around you has fallen into a deep hush. Only the cattle break the silence, their movements soft and scattered, like slow waves passing through the dark. The sound helps you relax further. Cowboys often describe that steady rhythm as the best nighttime reassurance they ever knew. If the herd stayed calm, so could you. Your fingers wander across the seams of the buffalo-lined blanket. They feel thick, uneven, and hand-stitched. Cowboys frequently repaired their own bedding, patching tears with bits of leather or twine. These blankets aged like living things. Every mark told a story. A snag from a thorny bush, a scorch mark from a night spent too close to a fire, a tear sown clumsily by someone too cold to care about neatness. You feel the personality of the blanket as much as its weight. The cold presses gently at the top of your head, so you pull your hat down a little further. The brim tilts just enough to block the icy air without covering your breath. You tuck your chin deeper under the wool, and the warmth becomes richer, more intimate. Your body has finally built a pocket of heat inside the roll. You can feel it cling to your skin like a second layer, protective and steady. You shift one arm out from under the blanket. Immediately the cold clamps down, biting along the exposed skin. You pull the arm back in quickly. Cowboys learn to avoid that exact mistake. Expose one limb for too long and it could stiffen, making morning chores twice as painful. They kept everything tucked, sealed, and layered. You mimic that instinct now, feeling the importance of each inch of fabric around you. You turn slightly onto your side, pressing the buffalo lining closer. The coarse fibers create tiny pockets of air that trap warmth remarkably well. You inhale through your nose, noticing the faint scent of old leather, dried grass, and wool that has traveled hundreds of miles. These smells might seem harsh in daylight, but at night they become grounding. They tell you that you are wrapped in the same protection that generations of riders trusted. A breeze glides across the prairie, gentle but cold. It brushes the outside of your blanket, but the layers hold firm. You feel the wind's edge, a coolness that never reaches your skin. You relax into it, appreciating how well your primitive insulation shields you. Cowboys used what they had, but what they had was often brilliant in its simplicity. Your horse gives a soft grunt, then settles again. You shift your hips slightly, adjusting to the contour of the ground. Your body sinks another inch into the warmth. Your breath slows. The wool tickles your cheek. The buffalo hair cradles your chest. The darkness folds around you like a slow-moving tide. You feel the warmth growing stronger now. A slow, steady build. It crawls from your shoulders down to your knees, filling every corner of the space you created. This is why cowboys trusted wool and buffalo hide. Not because they were comfortable in the traditional sense, but because they offered survival disguised as rough bedding. Your eyelids grow heavier as the warmth settles deeper. The blankets hold you in place, forming a small sanctuary against a vast, unforgiving world. You curl slightly tighter, letting the insulation wrap around your ribs, your arms, your legs, until you feel almost weightless. The prairie remains quiet, as if holding its breath while you drift. You inhale once more, slow and warm. The wool scratches lightly against your jaw. The buffalo hair feels heavy but comforting. The cold lingers at the edges, but it cannot reach you now. Wrapped in these humble layers, you begin to understand how cowboys managed to sleep through brutal cold. Not with comfort, not with ease, but with a stubborn acceptance carried inside wool, hide, and sheer endurance. You let that thought settle as your body sinks deeper into the warmth, drifting slowly into the steady quiet of the winter night. You lie still for a moment, letting the warmth inside your bedroll build, and then your ears begin to tune themselves to something deeper than the cold or the wind. It is the sound of the herd, a low, rhythmic blend of snorts, shifting hooves, and slow breaths drifting across the darkness like water moving under ice. You lift your head slightly from the saddle, adjusting your ear toward the soft chorus. This is the nightly music that shaped cowboy sleep more than blankets or campfires ever could. The range might be huge, the sky endless, but the herd made you feel less alone. Their sounds became a lullaby and an alarm system at the same time. You shift onto your side, listening more intently. One steer exhales sharply, another scuffs a hoof in the dirt. The noises overlap in a quiet, almost hypnotic rhythm. Cowboys relied on this harmony. If the herd stayed calm, they rested easily. If the rhythm broke, they woke in an instant. You find your breathing matching the pattern, slow and steady, as if your body understands the old rule without being taught. A detail that appears often in the journals of trailhands comes to mind. Herd animals at night tended to cluster loosely, spreading their weight across the ground while keeping enough distance to avoid crowding. Their steady noises carried across the plains and helped cowboys judge the cattle's mood. A restless herd meant danger, a quiet herd meant safety. You notice how each few seconds brings another soft grunt or shifting sound. Nothing urgent, nothing frantic. Everything seems balanced. The soundscape wraps gently around you. The breeze glides through dry grass with a soft hiss. Your horse lowers its head, tearing a few brittle stems from the earth. Farther away, a single cow gives a low, drawn-out moan that rolls across the darkness. It feels almost melodic. Cowboys described this nighttime choir as a kind of living heartbeat that pulsed through the prairie. Listening now, you understand exactly why. Your fingers rest loosely on the edge of your blanket. The wool traps heat, and the buffalo lining holds it even better. Yet it is not just warmth that soothes you. It is the steady reassurance of that distant, wandering music. You let your eyes drift half shut, imagining how many riders fell asleep to the exact same melody over the decades. Their bodies exhausted, their nerves stretched thin, but their minds anchored by the cattle's slow breathing. A peculiar little piece of cowboy lore flickers in your thoughts. Some riders claimed they could identify specific cows in the dark just by their nighttime noises. They said certain steers had distinct snores or particular rhythms in the way they shuffled their hooves. Other cowboys laughed at this claim, insisting it was simply the imagination of men who spent too much time outdoors. Still, the idea adds a bit of humor to the heavy air, and you find yourself listening with curiosity to see if any particular voice stands out. You shift your head back onto the saddle gently, letting your neck sink into the familiar curve. The leather feels warm now, holding the shape of your skull. The sound of the herd seems louder from this angle. Not overwhelming, just closer. You can almost map the herd's positions based on the distance of each grunt. You picture the animals forming small clusters, some lying down, some standing, some half grazing in their sleep. A long-standing disagreement among researchers lingers around this very phenomenon. Some argue that the calm, nighttime noises of cattle helped prevent stampedes because the herd sensed its collective rhythm and relaxed as a unit. Others believe the sounds had no real effect, claiming that panic spread so quickly during danger that no amount of nighttime harmony could stop it. There is no final verdict, and you find yourself imagining both possibilities as you listen to the herd breathe calmly under the stars. You tuck your chin deeper under the blanket as a breeze brushes the outside of your bedding. The cold tries to squeeze in, but your layers hold firm. The warmth deepens around you, steady and comforting. You inhale through your nose, taking in the dry scent of winter grass, leather, dust and wool. These aromas blend with the steady sound of the herd, creating a kind of sensory cradle that rocks you gently. A steer lets out a sudden snort that wakes your attention briefly. You lift your head an inch, listening carefully. The rustling pattern remains calm. No alarm. You lower your head again. Cowboys train themselves to react just like that. A sudden noise meant, listen first, move only if necessary. You feel the instinct settle into your bones, as if you have always known this quiet dance with the cattle. You stretch your legs slowly inside the bedroll. The warmth moves with you, and the blankets rustle softly. The sound blends with the herd's movements. Everything feels connected, each noise slipping seamlessly into the next. The cattle shift again, a wave of muffled steps moving across the space. You relax into the rhythm. The sky glows faintly with starlight. A thin cloud passes overhead, dimming the stars for a moment, then revealing them again. The cattle respond to small changes like this. Their breathing pauses, then resumes. You listen closely, learning their patterns. Cowboys often said that in the night, you learned the herd the way sailors learned the sea. Every ripple, every shift, every breath meant something. Another small anecdote comes to mind. Some trail hands liked to hum quietly while drifting to sleep, claiming the cattle relaxed when they heard a human voice. They hummed simple tunes or repeated soft phrases, Whether the cattle actually reacted to these noises or simply ignored them is unclear, but many riders swore by the practice. You consider humming now, but the night feels so peaceful that adding any sound of your own might break the spell. Your hands grow warmer under the blanket. Your breath evens out. The saddle supports your neck. The herd sings quietly into the cold. Everything around you settles into a gentle stillness. And yet the stillness is not empty. It is full of life, full of tiny sounds that keep your senses grounded. You close your eyes more fully now. The cattle continue their slow, steady chorus. A hoof thumps softly. A cow exhales a long breath. A rustle of grass wanders through the dark. Your mind floats on these sounds, carried by them the way a leaf drifts on water. You inhale once more, deeply. Warm air gathers inside your blanket, rising and falling with your chest. Your heartbeat slows. The herd's rhythm becomes your rhythm. The night becomes softer, safer, quieter. And with the steady music of cattle circling you, you begin to drift again, wrapped in warmth, wrapped in sound, sinking gently into the long winter night. You shift slightly under your blankets, feeling the heat you built earlier settle more firmly around your chest. But the night still has teeth. The cold creeps toward your fingers and toes with slow determination, as if testing the weak points of your cocoon. You tighten your grip on the wool, curl your shoulders inward, and focus on the small details of your own body. Out here, survival depends as much on warmth management as on cattle or gear. Cowboys understood this instinctively, especially when frost threatened to stiffen fingers and turn toes numb long before dawn. You wiggle your toes inside your boots, feeling the thick wool socks rub against your skin. The motion sends a faint spark of warmth up your calves. Cowboys did this often without thinking. Tiny movements kept their blood circulating. Stillness might conserve energy, but too much stillness invited frostbite. You flex your toes again, imagining how trail hands would shift their feet every few minutes, especially on nights when the cold pressed hard enough to sting. A detail commonly mentioned in old ranch diaries returns to you now. Cowboys learned early that layering mattered more than sheer thickness. 2 thinner socks trapped heat better than 1 bulky pair, and stuffing a bit of dry grass inside the boot created a simple but surprisingly effective insulating layer. You think about that trick as you stretch your toes again. The old methods might look primitive, but they carried a kind of practical genius. You free one hand from your blanket for a moment. The cold snaps at your knuckles instantly. You pull your hand back in with the urgency of someone who has just touched ice water. Inside the blanket, your fingers regain warmth slowly, tingling as blood flows through them. Cowboys understood this reaction well. They avoided exposing their hands unless absolutely necessary, especially on nights like this when even metal tools felt like frozen stones. A small, curious anecdote drifts into your mind. Some cowhands swore by rubbing a bit of animal fat on their fingertips before bed, believing it helped trap warmth and prevented skin from cracking. Others found the idea messy and unnecessary, but it became one of those quirky habits that passed from one crew to another, changing slightly each time, like a piece of folklore disguised as practical advice. You imagine scooping a little fat between your fingers now, though you settle instead for rubbing your palms together inside the blanket until heat blooms again. You nestle deeper into your roll, adjusting the blanket so it seals more tightly around your shoulders. The warmth grows thicker, but you still feel the cold tracing the edges of your cocoon, searching for openings. You tuck your elbows close to your ribs. This posture became a common cowboy habit on freezing nights. Closed body positions preserved warmth, while extended limbs lost it quickly. You shift your shoulders inward even more, feeling the heat gather in the core of your body like a small glowing coal. Your breath curls in soft clouds against the inside of your blanket. You angle your face toward the wool, letting the fabric catch some of the warm air. Cowboys often turned their faces slightly downward to warm the space directly around their mouth and nose. It kept their breathing comfortable and softened the bite of the cold air that hovered just outside the roll. You take another slow breath, savoring the subtle heat forming in front of your lips. Your horse snorts gently nearby, the sound muffled but reassuring. You listen closely. Its breathing tells you the cold has deepened. Horses breathe heavier when frost settles thick on their hides. You glance in its direction. A faint outline appears in starlight, the animal standing with its head lowered, conserving warmth the same way you are. Cowboys often read their horses like this, using the animal's reactions to judge how the night was progressing. A long-running disagreement in frontier studies surfaces in your thoughts. Some researchers believe cowboys developed exceptional resistance to cold simply through constant exposure, while others argue it was the result of strategic tricks passed down between generations. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. You feel both sides of the argument in your own body now. The cold still challenges you, but your instincts know how to respond better than they did just hours ago. You pull one knee upward inside the bedroll, creating a small pocket of warm air near your thigh. Then you shift the other knee to mirror the movement. This small shelter of warmth expands across your legs almost immediately. Cowboys often curled slightly in this way, protecting the vulnerable areas of their bodies from direct exposure to the ground's cold pull. You sense the wisdom of the posture as heat slides along your muscles. Your hands explore the inside of the blanket again. The wool holds warmth well, but the buffalo lining holds it even better. Your fingertips brush the coarse inner fibers, and the sensation reminds you of how deeply resourcefulness shaped cowboy life. Nothing was wasted. Every material had purpose. Every layer played a part. Another fragment of cowboy lore surfaces. Some riders slept with a heated stone wrapped in cloth tucked near their feet if they had access to a campfire earlier. The stone released warmth gradually through the night. It was unreliable, and few cowboys bothered with the extra effort unless the cold reached truly desperate levels. Tonight you wish for such a stone, though the heat inside your bedroll feels strong enough now to sustain you. The wind shifts lightly above you. You hear grass brush against grass, a soft whispering sound. You pull your hat a little lower, letting its brim add one more layer of protection for your forehead. Cowboys sometimes slept with the hat brim covering their noses slightly, letting their own breath warm the air around their face. You try a gentler version of this trick now. The air becomes noticeably milder, enough to soothe your cheeks. Your toes begin to tingle again, a good sign. You wiggle them softly, keeping the blood moving. This rhythmic motion becomes almost hypnotic. You flex your fingers next, just a little, then tuck your hands tighter under your chest. The warmth gathers again. The herd murmurs in the distance, a slow sweep of sound across the night. You listen closely, letting their rhythm comfort you. Each noise reminds you that you are not alone out here. Even in this cold so sharp it feels ancient. The cattle breathe, shuffle, and drift. Their warmth radiates into the air, subtle but present. You curl deeper into your blankets. The warmth becomes fuller now, soaking into your spine and shoulders. Your body has stopped fighting the cold and instead learned to work with the insulation around you. This shift feels peaceful, almost meditative. Cowboys described this moment often, the point where the cold stops being an enemy and becomes simply part of the night. Your breath slows, your limbs loosen, the warmth holds strong. You feel your fingertips soften inside the blanket. Your toes glow faintly with returning heat. The night still presses firmly against your shelter, but it cannot break through. You have sealed yourself in well, just as countless cowboys did, trusting small tricks, careful layers, and the instinct to protect the body's most fragile parts. You exhale one more slow, warm breath into the folds of your blanket. The wool catches it. The cold stays out. The prairie hums softly. And your body relaxes fully, knowing it has beaten back the worst of the night for now. You feel the warmth inside your bedroll settle into a steady pulse, but the quiet reminder settled in the back of your mind refuses to fade. Not every night on the trail allowed the luxury of a fire. In fact, many of the coldest nights were the ones when cowboys willingly kept flames dark. You lift your head a little from the saddle and let your eyes adjust to the soft, star-soaked darkness that surrounds you. No flicker of orange, no glowing coals. Just the faint shimmer of frost on the grass and the endless bowl of the night sky stretched above. Tonight, you sense the same caution that pushed cowboys to extinguish fire even when the temperature sank low enough to sting through wool. Fire can cast comfort, but it also casts danger. A bright flame could spook cattle or reveal a camp to anyone who had no business finding it. So you imagine your own camp, practicing that tense ritual now, letting the embers die until nothing remains but the faint smell of smoke drifting upward. You shift your shoulders slightly, rearranging your blanket as you take in the raw silence. Without fire, the cold feels deeper, sharper, but it also lets you hear the landscape more clearly. The sound of the wind brushing across dry grass becomes louder. The quiet breaths of nearby cattle grow more distinct, and somewhere far off, coyotes let out a thin, rising cry that fades quickly into the dark. You listen with the awareness that cowboys nurtured by necessity. A detail often mentioned in the writings of early trail captains circles through your thoughts. Large fires were prohibited on most drives because even a brief flare of light could set a nervous herd into motion. The shadows created by bright flames confused the animals, turning small movements into monstrous shapes. That confusion could trigger panic, and panic meant stampede. You picture a rider glancing repeatedly toward the spot where a fire should be, hands itching for warmth but knowing better than to strike a spark. You take a slow breath, pulling the cold air deep into your lungs. The sky feels enormous without the intrusion of smoke or firelight. Stars sharpen. The air turns glassy and still. Your senses stretch outward, reaching past your own small warmth. Everything feels both fragile and vast at once. Your fingers adjust the edge of your blanket again. Inside the roll, heat collects well. Outside it, the cold hangs like a curtain. You press your cheek to the wool and feel how quickly the temperature changes when just a bit of skin is exposed. Cowboys knew that even brief exposure could cost them precious heat. That knowledge shaped every movement. A stray memory from the folklore of the range comes to mind. Some cowhands believed that sleeping without a fire made a man tougher, that the land respected those who embraced the darkness. They said the night wrapped around such riders more gently, as if rewarded by the earth itself. Whether this idea ever held any real truth is impossible to know, but the claim says something about how these men framed hardship. If the cold could not be avoided, it could at least be dignified. You turn your body slightly, letting one knee shift inside the bedroll. The cold pushes at your exposed boot heel. You tuck it back in quickly. Every inch of warmth matters. You curl your legs tighter, sealing yourself more firmly inside the layers. The absence of fire makes the cold less forgiving. You sense the ground beneath you as a slow, patient force that pulls at the warmth inside your bones. The sky above takes on a black-blue sheen. A faint halo of frost begins to form on your hat brim. You tap it lightly and brush off the glittering crystals. Cowboys often woke to find themselves covered with a delicate coating of ice on nights like this. Their blankets grew stiff. Their saddles glinted white. Even their eyelashes froze together if they slept too long. A debate among frontier historians returns to your mind as you stretch your arms slightly under the covers. Some argue that cowboys avoided fire mainly to protect the herd from confusion. Others insist the caution had more to do with avoiding unwanted visitors, both human and animal. Bandits, rival trail outfits, and even curious wolves all found their way to firelight. The truth likely lies in the combination of both explanations. The West rarely offered a single reason for anything. You draw your hands deeper beneath your chest and breathe into your blanket to create a pocket of warm air. The wool absorbs the heat quickly. You exhale again. The air softens around your cheeks. This small trick mattered when flames were not an option. Cowboys relied on their own breath and body heat to create comfort, not on glowing embers. Your horse shifts its weight nearby, hooves pressing softly into the earth. The subtle movement reminds you that the animals endured these dark nights as well, often huddled together for warmth when the cold grew severe. You picture cattle curling their bodies against one another, their thick hides blocking wind far better than wool. They slept standing, half dreaming, half listening to predators. That resilience gave cowboys courage. You rest your head back onto the saddle and close your eyes for a moment, listening to the cold, not feeling it, listening. The absence of fire sharpens everything. You can sense the faint tremor of hooves through the ground, the hush of shifting animals, the small crack of frost breaking under pressure. These sounds wrap around you, creating a different kind of comfort. Not warm, but familiar. You open your eyes again and stare upward. The stars seem brighter now that your eyes have adjusted. They cluster thick above you, forming pale rivers across the sky. Cowboys often pass time naming constellations or creating their own stories to stay awake during night guard. In the quiet of a fireless camp, the sky felt closer. You imagine picking out your own constellations now, tracing your finger through the air and connecting stars as if they are part of some forgotten map. A cold breeze slips across your cheek. You retreat deeper into your bedroll. The buffalo hair brushes your chin, warm and dense. This fabric becomes your anchor again. Without fire, you depend entirely on the materials around your body: wool, hide, canvas, and breath. These were the real tools of survival. You stretch your toes again, feeling them regain warmth. The sensation spreads slowly upward. You shift your hips, settle more deeply into the earth, and let your body mold to the contours of the ground. The cold still presses, but you have learned enough tricks to manage it. Another story from cowboy lore rises gently in your memory. Riders sometimes whispered that the nights without fire made the stars whisper to the ground. No one agreed on what that meant, but the idea always held a quiet charm. Perhaps they meant that, in the dark, every sense sharpened. Perhaps they meant that silence held messages if a man was patient enough to listen. You close your eyes again and hear the soft murmur of cattle far across the camp. Their breaths meet the wind and blend with it. Your horse exhales in a gentle sigh. You settle your chin into the blanket, taking one last slow breath of warm air. Without fire, the night becomes honest. It shows you its cold edges, its shadows, its quiet truths. The prairie does not hide behind flickering light. It stretches open, wide and stark, and waits for you to accept it. You do. And wrapped inside your blankets, warmed little by little through your own efforts, you drift into sleep guided not by firelight but by the pure, unbroken darkness of the wild. You shift slightly in your bedroll, letting the darkness settle more heavily around your shoulders. The cold has reached its deepest point of the night, a kind of quiet intensity that presses against the ground and folds into every hollow of the land. But sleep on the range has rules of its own, and one of the harshest is the rotation of night guard. Cowboys did not sleep all the way through until morning. They slept in pieces, and each man took his turn watching over the herd. Now you imagine the moment when your name is called softly through the dark, and you must leave the warm cocoon you worked so hard to build. You lift your head reluctantly from the saddle. The leather, warm from your body, clings to your cheek for a second before releasing you back into the night. A rush of cold air hits your face immediately, stinging your skin. You grit your teeth and pull your blankets aside, feeling the chill creep in like a slow wave. Every cowboy knew this sensation. The hardest part of guard duty was not the watch itself, but the moment of leaving warmth behind. You sit up and rub your hands together, trying to coax life back into your fingers. In the dim starshine, the ground looks like a sheet of silver, each blade of grass coated with frost. You take a slow breath before rising to your feet. The air is sharp, almost metallic, and the cold settles into your ribs as you inhale. You draw your coat tighter around you. This is the hour when the world feels most silent, most ancient, as if the land has paused in its own long breath. A fact commonly referenced in accounts of trail life returns to your mind. Night guard was divided into shifts called watches. Each watch lasted a couple of hours, and riders rotated so no one man carried the burden alone. The most dreaded watch was the one just before dawn, when the cold peaked and exhaustion tugged at the mind like a heavy tide. You feel a flicker of sympathy for every cowboy who had to rise at this hour, especially on nights when sleep had barely begun to settle into his bones. You step carefully toward your horse, whose silhouette waits patiently a few paces away. The animal lifts its head and turns slightly as you approach. Its warm breath swirls in soft clouds. You place a hand gently on its neck, letting your fingers sink into its thick winter coat. The warmth that radiates from the animal feels almost alive, almost comforting enough to pull you back from the chill. The horse shifts, then settles, as if understanding your purpose. A small story traded among trail hands surfaces in your mind. Some riders insisted that a horse could sense when a man on guard duty was drifting towards sleep, nudging him gently or stamping a hoof to snap him awake. Whether this was true or simply the wishful thinking of exhausted cowhands, the image brings a faint smile to your face. You would appreciate such a guardian tonight. You begin your slow walk around the perimeter of the herd. The cattle rest scattered across the frost-coated ground, their bodies rising like dark mounds in the pale starlight. You listen closely. A snort, a shuffle, the slow grind of a hoof against frozen soil. These sounds tell you the herd is calm. The rhythm is steady. Nothing is stirring with fear. You pull your coat tighter as a gust of wind passes through. It is not strong, but it carries a bite that slips through seams and creeps along your spine. You tuck your chin into your collar. Cowboys fought cold not with thick clothing but with constant movement. A slow patrol around the herd created enough warmth to keep blood flowing. Still, the cold always managed to slip in somewhere, a reminder that the night was not a companion but a challenge. A small, curious tale flickers across your memory. Some cowboys chewed on small slivers of rawhide during guard duty to keep themselves awake. Others sang very softly or muttered stories under their breath to keep their minds from drifting. The point was simple. Stillness invited sleep, and sleep on guard invited disaster. You pause for a moment near the edge of the herd and let your eyes scan the horizon. The land stretches out like a dark ocean, rippling slightly in the faint breeze. A few scattered clouds drift across the sky, their shapes barely visible against the stars. You listen again. Nothing unusual. The cattle continue their quiet breathing. A disagreement that appears often in discussions of cowboy life crosses your thoughts. Some researchers claim night guard was the most feared task of the trail, more frightening than storms or river crossings. Others argue it was simply the most exhausting. The truth likely lies in the overlap of both feelings. Fear kept men alert. Exhaustion tried to pull them under. You feel both of those emotions brushing gently against your thoughts now. You take another slow step. The frost crunches beneath your boot. The sound is sharp, like a crack in thin ice. Somewhere in the distance an owl calls, then falls silent again. You shift your weight and rub your gloved hands together for more warmth. Your breath spills into the air in thick puffs that drift sideways in the wind. As you continue your patrol, you think about how night guard created a strange kind of intimacy between a cowboy and the land. In daylight, the prairie seemed huge, impossible to fully grasp. But at night, with only the sound of cattle and the soft rhythm of your own footsteps, the world felt closer. You could sense small shifts in wind, small changes in animal movement, and even the faint pull of the earth cooling beneath you. Your horse walks beside you now, matching your pace. Its presence keeps you grounded. You hear the soft thud of hooves with each step. You rest your hand occasionally on its neck, letting its warmth seep into your fingers. Cowboys rarely patrolled alone. Their horses accompanied them like silent partners, watching the darkness with calmer eyes. You pause again at the far edge of the herd, scanning the shapes spread across the land. The cattle remain peaceful. Their breaths rise in slow waves, creating a faint mist that hangs low before dissolving into the night. You feel your shoulders relax a little. Guard duty rarely granted comfort, but it granted purpose, and purpose kept men awake. The cold thickens around you again. You swallow slowly, feeling the chill at the back of your throat. You shift your weight and take another step, then another. The repetition becomes its own rhythm. Step, listen, breathe. Step, Listen, breathe. Your mind drifts to the cowboys who walked this same path decades before you. Men who guarded herds across Kansas, Texas, Colorado, and beyond. Men who measured time not by clocks but by stars and the rising chill. You feel a sense of kinship with them, even though the years between you are countless. The night has a way of erasing distance. Your breath grows steadier. Your steps grow sure. The quiet becomes familiar. And little by little, the shiver in your body settles into something calmer. Guard duty is cold. It is lonely. But it is also necessary. It gives shape to the night. You take one last circuit, passing the cattle slowly, listening for any change. Nothing shifts. Nothing stirs. The herd remains calm, and that calm enters your body like a slow wave of reassurance. Soon your shift will end, and someone else will rise from his bedroll to take your place. You will return to your blankets, curl again into your small pocket of warmth, and drift off as the world continues its slow, frozen rhythm. But for now, you keep watch, steady and quiet, a single figure walking through a vast, silent sea of cold and starlight. You feel the weight of fatigue settling into your shoulders as you complete your final slow circuit around the herd. The cold has sharpened again, the kind that sneaks beneath your coat and curls against your ribs. You give your horse a gentle tap on the neck, signaling the end of your patrol, and guide it back toward your bedroll. But as you approach your small patch of ground, the wind gives a sudden surge, louder and harsher than before. It sweeps across the prairie with a long, rising moan that makes the grass bow low and sends a spray of icy dust skittering over the earth. The night has shifted. You kneel beside your blankets and rest your hand on the saddle, waiting for the gust to pass. It does not. Another surge follows, then another. This is how rainstorms often begin, not with lightning or clouds, but with restless wind that grows teeth. You glance at the horizon. The sky looks unchanged, but you can feel the tension hiding in the air. Cowboys knew this feeling well. A calm night could turn treacherous in minutes, especially when winter storms rolled across open country without warning. You settle back into your bedroll as quickly as you can. The warmth you created earlier still lingers inside the layers, but now the cold presses harder at the edges. You pull the buffalo-lined blanket up to your chin and tuck your elbows tightly against your sides. The canvas rustles against your shoulders as the wind pushes against it. You breathe into the wool again, letting the warm air collect near your face. A detail often mentioned in frontier newsletters and ranch letters surfaces in your thoughts. Cowboys described sudden cold fronts sweeping across the plains like invisible walls. One moment the night felt manageable. The next it felt like a blast of ice straight from the mountains. These shifts caught many riders off guard. Even the most seasoned cowboys could be humbled by storms that moved faster than a horse could gallop. You lie back as the wind intensifies. The ground trembles slightly beneath you, not from hooves, but from the movement of air pushing across the land. Your horse shuffles nervously beside your bedroll, snorting once before lowering its head. Animals sense storms before humans do. You reach out a hand and touch its leg lightly, grounding both of you. Another gust tears across the prairie, bringing with it the faintest sting of dust against your cheeks. You tighten your blanket and angle your body so the wind hits your back rather than your chest. Cowboys learned these tricks instinctively. Position mattered. A slight shift in angle could save precious warmth. A curious old story from trail tradition comes to mind. Some cowhands swore the wind carried voices during storms, claiming they could hear faint calls or whispers weaving through the gusts. Others dismissed it as the imagination of exhausted men trying to stay awake. Tonight, as you listen closely, the wind does seem to hold a strange timbre. Not voices exactly, but layers of sound that flicker in and out like distant murmurs. You close your eyes and let the storm develop around you. The cattle begin to respond. A few shift. One snorts loudly. Another stamps a hoof, agitated. Their unease moves in small waves through the herd, creating a low chorus of restless sounds. You know this pattern well. The animals can tolerate cold, but sudden blasts unsettle them. Cowboys often feared storms less for the weather itself, and more for what it could do to the herd. A frightened steer could set off a chain reaction, turning quiet night into chaos. You lift your head slightly to listen more carefully. The cattle are restless but not panicked. Their breathing grows heavier, their movements grow sharper. You settle back again, trusting that your earlier guard shift gave you enough sense of their mood. The herd has not crossed the line into danger. You shift deeper into your bedroll. The wind presses harder now, pushing the canvas against your back with small jolts. The cold sneaks along your neck. You tuck your chin and pull your hat lower. Your breath creates a fog inside the blanket. You inhale that warm air again, holding it for a few seconds before releasing it in a slow stream. A long-standing debate in frontier studies drifts through your mind as you adjust your legs. Scholars examining old drive records argue whether cowboys adapted better to storms through experience or sheer endurance. Some insist it was technique and constant observation that made survival possible. Others claim it was simply grit, stubbornness, and the willingness to keep moving even when the cold cut deep. You feel both sides tugging at your senses now. Knowledge helps, but endurance carries you through the moments when knowledge runs out. Another gust slams across the prairie. This one's stronger. It lifts tiny grains of frozen dust and flings them across your bedroll like sand. The canvas rattles. You brace your shoulders and let the storm wash over you. The noise grows louder, like a distant river rushing through a canyon. Then it dips for a moment, only to return with renewed force. Storm winds on the plains rarely come as steady streams. They surge in pulses, attacking and retreating, as if feeling their way across the land. Your horse turns its body to face away from the wind, a sign of instinct working quietly. You adjust your own position to mirror the animal. This alignment gives your back the most protection and lets your blankets hold their warmth better. The buffalo lining presses warmly against your chest, heavy but steady. The cattle moan again. One lets out a longer, lower sound that echoes faintly. You listen closely. Still no panic, just discomfort. You feel a flicker of relief. You lie still for a moment, letting the sound of the wind settle into your awareness. It roars. It quiets. It roars again. Your bedroll rustles. Your breath fogs. Your fingers twitch inside your blanket, trying to shake off the cold creeping into your knuckles. A small anecdote from cowboy lore drifts through your thoughts. Some riders said the best way to outlast storm winds was to imagine themselves sinking into the earth like stones. The less you fought the cold, the easier it became to endure. You try that now. You let your muscles loosen. You let your body settle heavily into the ground. The cold still surrounds you, but your resistance softens. You exhale slowly, letting your breath fill your small shelter again. The wind screams briefly above you, but your blankets hold. The warmth grows steadier. A quiet confidence settles in your chest. Storm nights tested every man on the range. They tested blankets, bedrolls, horses, and nerves. But they also taught resilience. Tonight you feel that lesson taking shape inside you. Each gust that crashes across the land reminds you that cold is a companion as much as it is a threat. It shapes you. It challenges you. It forces you to adapt. The storm pulses again, but you remain steady in your little nest of wool and canvas. The herd begins to calm. Your horse breathes evenly. The wind loses a bit of its bite. Wrapped in warmth while the storm rages above, you sink slowly into a wary, half-conscious rest. Not quite asleep, not fully awake, balanced somewhere between the two, just as cowboys did for generations on winter nights when the sky refused to stay still. You lie still as the storm wind slowly fades, leaving the prairie wrapped in a deep, uneasy quiet. The blankets hold your warmth, but your ears stay alert. Out here, sleep was never a complete surrender. Cowboys drifted in and out of awareness, always listening for the night's shifting balance. Now you feel that same fragile awareness settling into your thoughts. The wind has calmed, But the predators that roam the plains do not move with the storm. They move with hunger. And the dark around you seems to thicken with the possibility of watching eyes. You lift your head slightly, letting your ear hover above the saddle's curved leather. The cold air brushes beneath your jawline as you scan the silence. The soundscape has changed. The cattle, which murmured restlessly during the storm, now grow quieter, their movements slower. You hear occasional breaths, soft exhalations drifting upward. Their calmness is reassuring, but you also know that true danger approaches quietly, not loudly. A detail often repeated in the old accounts of range life surfaces in your thoughts. Cowboys relied heavily on their ears at night because visibility was almost non-existent. Moonlight helped when the sky allowed it, but many nights were as dark as closed barns. Coyotes, cougars, and wolves knew how to use that darkness. They approached herds in slow arcs, looking for stragglers or weakened animals. The riders slept lightly because they understood that danger arrived not with a roar, but with the faintest shift in sound. You push your blanket up just enough to free one arm, then quickly retreat back into the warmth once you check the temperature. The cold hits hard. It tightens your skin instantly. You tuck your elbow back in and breathe into your blanket until the sting fades. You listen again, giving your senses time to quiet. A long moan from a distant cow drifts through the dark. Not panic, just discomfort. Then a soft shuffle of hooves. Then silence. You remain still, feeling the tension in your muscles linger. You know the cattle's rhythm by now. Their breathing has patterns. Their movements have a pulse. Any break in that pulse is a warning. A faint sound touches your ear. A low, drawn-out yip rising somewhere near the horizon. You recognize it immediately. Coyotes. Their voices float through the cold air like thin threads of music. One yip becomes three, then fades. You listen carefully, counting the distance. They are far, but not far enough to ignore. Coyotes rarely pose danger to full-grown cattle, but they investigate. They probe, and their presence can unsettle a herd more than the cold ever could. You shift slightly in your bedroll, mindful of noise. The buffalo lining brushes your chin, warm and coarse. You peer over the top of your blanket and watch the horizon. Nothing moves. The stars flicker faintly above you, but the ground remains still. A small, curious story whispered along many trail crews returns to mind. Some cowboys claimed coyotes liked to test sleeping men, creeping close enough to sniff bedrolls if the herd felt calm. Others argued this was pure exaggeration, born from men who spent too long alone in the cold. The truth lies somewhere uncertain. Tonight you imagine the possibility and pull your blanket a little tighter. You listen again. Your horse gives a soft, uneasy snort. That sound sharpens your senses more than any coyote call. Horses do not spook at every noise. They respond to patterns, to movement. You raise your head slightly, letting your breath drift out in a thin white cloud. The horse steps once, then grows still again. That is good. If danger were close, the animal would not have calmed so quickly. You settle back down, though you keep your head slightly raised. Sleeping near predators required a strange balance. You had to rest, but you also had to maintain a thin thread of consciousness, a small flame of awareness glowing in the back of your mind. Cowboys mastered this state through experience, often claiming that the land itself taught them to sleep lightly. A topic of ongoing discussion among researchers comes to you as you stare into the dark. Some argue that cowboys developed a heightened sense of nocturnal awareness simply because the environment demanded it. Others believe the long hours spent alone with animals sharpened their instincts beyond normal limits. Either explanation feels believable when you hear another distant yip echo across the prairie. Your muscles tighten again, then slowly relax. You lower your cheek back onto the saddle. The leather is cold but familiar. Your breath warms the space inside your blanket. You keep your hand near your chest, tucked tightly. The night grows quiet again. The coyotes have moved on, at least for now. But predators are not the only creatures that complicate a cowboy's rest. Cougars stalk silently, their paws barely touching the earth. Their eyes follow movement with careful precision. They do not call out or alert their prey. They simply wait. The thought slips into your mind, not as fear, but as cautious respect. Cowboys encountered cougars more often than many modern readers assume. The animals avoided fire and camp noise, but drifted close on quiet, moonless nights. You angle your face upward, scanning the nearby ridgeline. Your breath curls into the air. Nothing moves. No shadow breaks the line of grass. You exhale slowly, letting your weariness settle behind your ribs. The range feels huge, but cougars know how to disappear inside it. A memory shared in many old ranch journals floats forward now. Some trail hands claimed their best warning during cougar nights came from the cattle themselves. A cow would raise its head, another would shift uneasily. A quiet ripple of tension would pass through the herd. Cowboys learned to trust that ripple more than their own eyes. You listen carefully for that ripple now. The cattle remain calm. The rhythm holds. Crickets begin to chirp softly near your feet. The sound is faint, almost apologetic after the storm's roar. You feel your shoulders loosen. Predators rarely approach when insects feel safe enough to resume their songs. You breathe deeper, inhaling the cold air and the faint scent of sagebrush drifting nearby. The sky widens above you again, the stars emerging with clearer brilliance now that the gusts have died down. The moon peeks from behind a small patch of cloud, casting a pale glow across the prairie. Your bedroll warms slowly around you, responding to your steady breath. You tuck your chin deeper into the blanket and let your eyelids lower, though not fully. Another story from cowboy lore rises in your memory. Some riders said the best way to rest on predator-heavy nights was to imagine you were floating above your own body, lightly tethered, but always aware. They described a kind of drifting half-sleep where sound became more vivid than vision. You feel yourself slipping into that state now. The cattle breathe. Your horse shifts lightly. The wind brushes the grass with a faint whisper. You inhale again. Your body grows heavier, warmer. The cold hovers outside the canvas but fails to break through. The danger of the night becomes a distant possibility rather than an immediate threat. You can rest. Not deeply, not completely, but enough. You close your eyes halfway, letting the prairie soundscape keep your senses balanced. Coyotes call once more, farther this time. The cattle remain calm. Your horse stands steady, and you drift quietly along the edge of sleep, wrapped in wool, wrapped in darkness, wrapped in the strange companionship of the wild creatures that share this frozen night. You lie still for a long moment, letting the final echoes of coyote calls slide off into the distance. The herd settles again, your horse relaxes, and the night drifts back to its slow, steady rhythm. You feel your breath warming the inside of your blanket, soft and reassuring. But out here, sleep does not always happen on the ground. Cowboys often spent entire days and nights in the saddle, especially during long drives when time pressed and distance mattered more than comfort. Tonight, you allow your thoughts to follow one of those long trail nights, imagining what it felt like to drift into half-dreams while riding under a frozen sky. You pull your blanket a bit higher and shift your cheek against the saddle. The leather feels warm now, the curve familiar. You picture yourself rising from this patch of ground, throwing the blanket over your shoulders, and stepping back into the saddle, even though your body aches. Cowboys sometimes rode through the night to calm a restless herd or to reach a distant water source before sunrise. In those hours, the saddle became both chair and bed, a strange cradle that rocked with the rhythm of your horse's gait. A widely accepted detail in old trail diaries slips into your thoughts. Many cowhands learned to sleep lightly while mounted, trusting their horses to follow the herd or the trail without much guidance. Riders slumped forward, reins loosely wrapped around one hand, eyes half closed as their horses carried them through long, cold hours. The mount kept moving, kept breathing, kept warmed by its own muscles. You imagine the steady sway beneath you, a slow side-to-side motion that lulls your body the way waves lull a tired sailor. You shift inside your bedroll now, feeling that imagined motion settle into your mind. The idea seems impossible at first. Sleep while riding? But the rhythm of a good horse is steady, predictable, and far gentler than the frozen ground pressing under your back. After days of riding, your muscles learned the patterns so deeply that your mind could drift without losing balance. Some trail hands claimed they could nap sitting upright, eyes closed, while their horses followed the herd naturally. Whether they slept or slipped into a trance is hard to tell, but the body finds rest in strange places when exhaustion demands it. A small, curious anecdote often shared among ranch veterans flickers in your memory. Some riders said they dreamed vividly in the saddle, drifting into strange visions filled with dust, hoofbeats, and faraway campfires. They claimed the rocking motion shaped the dreams, turning them into slow, floating scenes that blurred between trail reality and wandering imagination. You imagine those dreams now, drifting through moonlight, hearing faint cattle calls echoing inside your mind, feeling your horse's warmth beneath you even as your thoughts wander far. You shift your legs slightly inside the warmth of your roll. Your knees brush against the blanket, and the sensation reminds you of gripping the sides of a saddle to stay balanced. You picture your hands resting gently along the horn, fingers numb with cold but still steady enough to stay connected. The night air around you feels deep, heavy, and strangely quiet. You let that silence wrap around you. Your horse snorts nearby, breaking your thoughts for a moment. You glance toward its silhouette. Horses played a critical role in those late-night rides. Their instincts guided the movement more than any conscious command from the rider. Riders trusted their horses deeply during these hours. When eyes closed, reins loosened, and minds drifted, the horse became the true guardian of that fragile sleep. An ongoing discussion in cowboy history comes to mind. Some researchers suggest that riders developed a unique sensory awareness while sleeping in the saddle, able to detect shifts in movement even while partly unconscious. Others argue that it was not awareness at all, but the horse compensating for the rider's relaxed posture. The debate remains unresolved, and perhaps it always will. You feel that ambiguity as you imagine yourself swaying with each gentle step the horse takes. You adjust your body again, curling deeper into the blankets, letting their weight mimic the shape of a saddle's embrace. Your eyelids grow heavier. The rhythm of cattle breathing and the faint rustle of prairie grass blend into a soothing undertone. Your thoughts wander back to those imagined night rides. You picture your horse walking steadily under a sky filled with stars, its hooves tapping softly against frozen soil. The pace is slow, unhurried, and the rest you gain is delicate but real. You picture yourself leaning forward, resting your chest lightly against the horse's neck, your cheek brushing warm hair. The horse radiates heat from long hours of movement. You inhale deeply and imagine the scent of dust, sweat, and crisp night wind. Many cowhands claimed that sleeping against a horse's neck was warmer than any blanket. You can almost feel that warmth now, drifting through your imagination like a gentle tide. A faint shift in the wind makes your blanket flutter slightly at the edge, pulling you back to the present. You tuck it more firmly around your shoulders and nestle deeper. The wind quiets. The herd remains calm. You listen to their slow breathing, letting it form a background hum. Your mind returns to the saddle. You imagine holding the reins loosely between two fingers, the leather pressing gently into your glove. The sway intensifies slightly as your horse steps over uneven ground. You adjust instinctively, shifting your weight even while half asleep. Cowboys described this unconscious balancing as second nature. Over time, the body learned to absorb each movement without waking fully. Another small story from old ranch cookbooks and campfire conversations appears in your thoughts. Some cowboys said the best sleep they ever had was in the saddle during a long, steady night ride, the kind where the horse moved without pause and the cold air kept their senses sharp, even as their minds drifted. They claimed the saddle shaped their dreams, giving them visions filled with star-filled skies and endless prairies. You picture those dreams unfolding like a slow-moving tapestry. Your breath grows slower now, steady and warm. You shift your hands beneath your chin, feeling the wool scratch lightly against your knuckles. The quiet of the range presses gently around you. The cold still exists, but your blankets cradle you, building warmth in the space between fabric and skin. You imagine the moment when a cowboy would wake abruptly in the saddle. A slight jolt, a hoof stumbling, a steer bellowing, eyes snapping open to a sky that looks exactly the same as it did moments earlier. You picture yourself blinking awake, gripping the saddle again, adjusting your weight, and guiding your horse back into alignment with the herd. You relax into the blankets, feeling sleep press closer. Your body sinks lightly against the canvas beneath you. The sound of the cattle's steady breathing aligns with your own. You let the imagined sway of the saddle drift across your senses, rocking you gently even though you remain on the cold ground. You sigh softly, warm air filling the space near your face. Your eyelids flutter. The night deepens. The range quiets. And wrapped in wool and shadow, you slip into your own drifting half-dreams, just as cowboys did while riding through the long, frozen nights of the wild. You shift in your bedroll, letting the imagined sway of saddle sleep fade from your thoughts as the cold reminds you where you truly are. Your breath curls softly against the wool, and the quiet across the range settles once again. But now your attention drifts to a far more practical problem, one that cowboys faced almost nightly whether they liked it or not. Wet gear. Nothing steals warmth more quickly. Nothing turns a quiet night into a slow torture more effectively. And nothing tested cowboy grit quite like climbing into a bedroll, with clothing soaked from river crossings, sleet, or sweat. You exhale into your blanket, feeling the warmth pool around your face. The air smells faintly of wool, dust, and the lingering echo of last night's storm. You shift one arm free and let it rest on the saddle, the leather cool beneath your palm. Wet gear was one of the cowboys' greatest enemies in cold weather, and you can almost feel the dread of peeling off damp clothing after hours of riding through icy creeks or sudden rain. A detail often mentioned in the old remembrances of trail hands flickers through your mind. Cowboys rarely had the luxury of letting gear dry fully. On long drives, they crossed rivers without stopping. They rode through sudden downpours that turned dust to mud in seconds. They worked cattle in freezing sleet with water dripping steadily from the brim of their hats. By nightfall, everything they owned weighed twice as much with moisture. Yet they had no choice but to sleep in it or beside it. You pull the buffalo-lined blanket tighter around your shoulders as you imagine the feel of wet wool clinging to your skin. Damp wool is heavy, stubborn, and slow to warm. Cowboys often describe the sensation like wearing a sponge that refused to give back any heat. You press further into the warmth of your roll, grateful your own layers are dry tonight, but the memory of their discomfort lingers in your thoughts. Your horse gives a soft grunt nearby. You glance in its direction. The animal shakes itself, releasing a faint spray of frost into the air. Its coat is thick, built for surviving the worst weather, yet even horses suffered under wet saddles and damp blankets. Cowboys did everything they could to protect their mounts, but the elements were relentless. A curious anecdote from old trail lore drifts into your memory. Some cowhands claimed the best way to dry a wet blanket was to sleep inside it, letting the heat of your own body push the moisture outward. The idea sounds miserable, but desperate men did what desperate nights required. They wrapped themselves in damp wool and breathed warmth into it until the fibers softened. You imagine doing that now. The cold would bite at first, maybe even sting. But slowly, painfully, the warmth would return. You tuck your knees slightly, letting the blanket fold more snugly around your hips. The warmth deepens. You know that if your clothing were wet, you would not dare move too much. Movement pushes cold air into damp fabric. Stillness helps build heat. Cowboys often lay stiff as boards during wet nights, trying to coax warmth into the clinging layers inch by inch. A long-standing discussion among frontier historians arises in your thoughts. Some believed cowboys grew so used to wet gear that their bodies adapted, toughening their skin and nerves to cold moisture. Others insisted no one truly adjusted to it, and riders simply endured through willpower and exhaustion. You sense the difficulty of choosing a side. Endurance and adaptation feel almost intertwined out here. You shift slightly, letting the blanket rustle quietly. The cold tries to edge in again. You feel it along your collarbones and the tips of your ears. You pull your hat down a little more and exhale slowly into the warmth. Then your mind drifts to another problem cowboys faced: frozen gear. Damp clothing or saddles left out too long could freeze into stiff, unyielding shapes. Saddles became hard as boards. Blankets crackled when folded. Lariats turned rigid and unruly. Cowboys woke to find their coats frozen into strange, hunched positions, as if occupied by invisible spirits. You imagine reaching for a frozen coat in the morning. It resists, stiff and stubborn. You would have to slam it against the saddle horn or stomp it under your boot heel to break the frost. The idea makes your fingers ache just thinking about it. Your own coat remains soft tonight, warmed by your body heat and shielded inside the roll. But you can almost feel the ghost of that icy stiffness against your skin. Your horse shifts again. Its breath drifts in steady clouds. You watch the rhythmic puff, warm and alive. Cowboys sometimes hung wet clothing over the backs of their horses while riding, letting the animal's body heat dry the fabric. It worked surprisingly well, though not always comfortably for the horse. But in desperate cold, survival took priority over courtesy. You nestle deeper into your bedroll, imagining the frustration of lying down in wet socks. Feet mattered more than almost anything. Frozen toes did not heal easily. Cowboys often rubbed their feet vigorously before sleeping or held them close to their horses' warm sides. Some stuffed grass or spare cloth into their boots to create makeshift insulation. You stretch your toes inside your own warm socks now, grateful for dryness. A small tale floats into your thoughts, something trail cooks like to tell around meager camp stoves. They said the best cure for wet gear was a fire that refused to die, and a man stubborn enough to turn his blanket slowly every few minutes. But fires were not always available, and even when they were, too much heat could scorch wool or shrink leather. Cowboys had to use judgment, patience, and nothing more reliable than their own instincts. You inhale deeply, letting the warmth fill your chest. Then you imagine the slow misery of clothing that freezes to your skin. It happened more often than most care to imagine. Sweat trapped in fabric became icy glue. Removing such clothing tore at skin. Men avoided stripping layers on cold nights because once removed, damp shirts or trousers could not be put back on without agony. Staying dressed, even in misery, often meant survival. You shift again, curling into a slightly tighter posture. Your back warms as the blanket closes in around you. The imaginary chill fades. The reality of your warmth grows. Cowboys carried no spare outfits. If their gear was soaked, they lived with it. If their blankets were wet, they slept anyway, and somehow most endured. Your mind drifts now to the feeling of rising at dawn after a night spent drying gear with nothing but your own body heat. The wool would feel slightly damp, but warmer. The coat softer. The saddle loosened just enough to avoid bruising. That slow process of thawing and drying became its own victory. Every cowboy knew the relief of realizing he had made it through the worst of the cold. You let the warmth of your own dry blankets soothe you deeper into rest. The cold remains outside. The herd breathes slowly in the distance. Your horse stands steady and relaxed. The night around you is vast, but your small shelter holds firm. And with your thoughts drifting among the countless struggles of wet wool, frozen leather, and stubborn endurance, you slip quietly towards sleep, warmed by gratitude for dryness and the faint memory of all those riders who faced the cold with nothing more than grit and determination. You curl deeper into your blankets, letting the warmth pool along your ribs, and the quiet around you settles into something softer. The storm has faded, the predators have drifted away, and the night feels still again. But the cold remains, a constant presence stretching across the prairie like an invisible sheet. As you breathe into your wool cocoon, You think about another unexpected tool cowboys used to survive freezing nights: snow itself. Strange as it sounds, snow could be an ally. A shelter, a buffer against wind that cut sharper than knives. Tonight you imagine discovering that truth the same way many cowboys once did, through quiet trial and uncertain necessity. You lift your head slightly from the saddle and look across the darkened plain. The stars glimmer faintly on the frost, and in some patches the ground looks faintly dusted with pale powder. You imagine stepping off your horse after a long, brutal ride through winter country, and realizing the only shelter available lies not above the ground, but on it. Cowboys learned that snow, packed correctly, could block wind far better than open air. When no rock, brush, or hillside offered protection, a drift became the next best thing. You stretch your toes within your blanket, feeling the growing warmth, and let your mind drift through the memory of old trail stories. A detail preserved in several winter cattle drive accounts rises to the surface. Riders learn to carve shallow hollows into snowbanks and settle their bedrolls inside the curve. The snow insulated against wind, trapping pockets of warmer air while blocking the worst gusts. The first few minutes were agony, but once the body heat settled into the small chamber, it created a surprising sense of protection. You shift your weight now, feeling the canvas beneath you, and imagining how cold it would be if not for the layers beneath your back. Then picture brushing snow aside to make a shallow dip. Your fingers sting even in imagination. The cold would numb your hands instantly. Cowboys worked fast, using boots, the flat of a hat, or sometimes the edge of a saddle to carve the shape. The goal was not depth but shelter, a curve that stopped the wind, a shape that held warmth. Something small enough that a single human body could heat the space. A small, curious anecdote from frontier stories drifts forward. Some cowboys claimed they slept warmer inside snow hollows than in open air, saying the wind could not find them there. They joked that snow made a better wall than any tent flap because it did not flap or tear. Whether they said this with pride or dry humor is impossible to know, but the idea left an impression on every rider who faced winter on the plains. You breathe slowly, your exhale warming the wool in front of your chin. The warmth feels steady. You imagine lying inside a drift with only a blanket between your body and frozen earth. At first, the cold would seep relentlessly into your bones, but after a few minutes, your own heat would start building a cocoon inside the hollow. Cowboys trusted this strange method because they had no alternative. Winter offered no mercy. If wind cut too fiercely, snow became the only shelter. Your horse shifts again nearby. The rustle of its movement reminds you that animals use snow for protection too. Wild bison, deer, and even wolves curled behind drifts to block the wind. Cowboys observed these animals over years and learned from them. They watched how mustangs positioned themselves behind raised mounds of snow, heads lowered, bodies angled. They saw survival mirrored in every creature across the plains. A long-standing conversation in ranch history comes to your thoughts. Some researchers argue that native tribes influenced cowboy winter tactics, including the use of snow as insulation. Others propose that cowboys learned primarily from observing animals after spending countless nights outdoors. Both ideas feel plausible, and you sense how knowledge on the range often came from layered sources, each shaped by necessity. You adjust your shoulder inside your blanket. The feeling of warmth reminds you how precious insulation becomes when winter tightens its grip. Now imagine settling inside a snow hollow. You would tuck your bedroll carefully, creating a small mound at your back. The drift would curve over you like a shallow roof. The wind would whistle above but fail to reach your body. The cold inside the hollow would still be fierce, but it would be still, not slicing or punishing. Cowboys valued still cold over sharp cold. Stillness meant your warmth could accumulate rather than be stolen. You shift again, picturing the steps. You would choose a drift that leaned slightly with the wind. You would carve just enough space for yourself, no more. Extra room meant extra cold. You would angle your body so your breath warmed the hollow. You would pull the blanket tight around your shoulders and tuck your knees toward your chest to build heat faster. The snow surrounding you would act like a wall, thick and unmoving, keeping the wind above your head. A story passes through your mind, one shared by an old foreman in his later years. He claimed he once survived a brutal blizzard by curling inside a drift with his horse standing guard at the entrance. The animal sheltered the opening, blocking even more wind. Whether the story was fact or embellishment hardly mattered. It captured the strange, resourceful relationship cowboys had with the land and their animals. You nestle deeper into your bedroll now, as if demonstrating the same instinct. The cold outside seems distant, pushed back by the warmth you created earlier. The sound of the herd drifts lightly across the night. A soft shuffle, a low grunt. The rhythm remains calm. Your eyelids grow heavy again, but you stay half aware. You imagine the snow hollow from the inside, the gentle glow of moonlight filtering through the thin top layer, the muffled sound of wind. The way the world seems smaller, quieter, more intimate. Cowboys often describe the feeling as being inside the earth rather than on it, enclosed by nature's own walls. The comfort was fragile, but it existed. You shift your legs, curling them slightly closer. The warmth inside your roll deepens. You imagine frost forming lightly on the edge of your blanket if you slept inside a snowbank. Cowboys woke with ice crystals glinting in their beards, snowflakes clinging to their sleeves, and frozen breath decorating the underside of their hats. Yet they survived. The snow trapped their heat well enough to outlast the storm. You inhale deeply, letting the warm air settle across your chest. The cold outside hovers patiently, but inside your cocoon everything grows softer. The prairie stretches wide, but the night feels close and safe for the moment. You think once more about how strange it is that snow, something so bitter and cold, could become shelter. But out here, survival does not depend on comfort. It depends on recognizing every tool the land offers, even the ones that appear at first as threats. You close your eyes slowly, keeping one ear tuned to your horse and the herd. The cold remains, but your warmth holds. The darkness remains, but your shelter stands strong. And wrapped in wool, memory, and stillness, you drift again toward rest, surrounded by the quiet knowledge that even winter's harshest elements could be turned into allies by those who called the range their home. You ease your head deeper into the saddle's curve, letting the warmth inside your blanket settle into a steady pulse. The night around you has grown impossibly quiet again, stripped clean by the storm's passing. Even the wind seems to be catching its breath, and in this long stretch of stillness, your mind drifts to something cowboys relied on more than blankets, bedrolls, or snow shelters. Something humble, bitter, and strangely comforting. Coffee, midnight coffee. The one ritual that cut through exhaustion and cold with a clarity nothing else could match. You shift slightly, imagining the moment when a cowboy crawled out of his bedroll in the dark, fingers numb, joints stiff, and moved toward the faint glow of a campfire or a few reignited coals. He crouched low, shielding any spark from the wind, and brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to stand on its own legs. The steam rose into the cold, carrying the smell of roasted beans mixed with smoke and iron. Even now, with no fire burning near you, you can almost smell that earthy aroma floating through memory. A widely accepted detail in trail camp records comes to mind. Cowboys drank coffee at every hour, but the night ritual had a special purpose. The caffeine pushed back against freezing fatigue, keeping the mind sharp during herd watches or sudden storms. The warmth sank into hands and bellies, giving the body the illusion of heat even when the temperature plummeted. Many riders swore they would have frozen without it. Whether the claim was literal or not, it hints at how deeply coffee shaped their nights. You inhale slowly, imagining that first sip. The taste would be harsh, bitter, sometimes burned, sometimes watery, sometimes thick with leftover grounds. But in the cold, flavor did not matter. Warmth mattered, heat sliding down, the throat mattered. That faint burst of energy mattered. Cowboys embraced these small comforts fiercely. You shift again, your blanket brushing your chin. Your breath warms the wool as you imagine kneeling beside a battered pot. Cowboys often kept the coffee simmering long past midnight, adding water again and again, until the brew turned black and murky. They joked that a spoon could stand upright in a proper cowboy pot. Some crews believed coffee should taste like penalty and survival at the same time. A small, curious tale whispered among chuck wagon cooks floats into your thoughts. Some riders insisted the coffee tasted best when made with water scooped from a slow-moving creek under starlight. They said the minerals made the brew richer, smoother. Others scoffed at this idea, claiming that all coffee tasted like mud unless the pot boiled hard enough. These disagreements never ended, and they never needed to. Cowboys took pride in simple things. The imaginary warmth of that cup lingers as you exhale into your bedroll again. You feel your fingers loosen a little, the cold lifting just enough. You picture holding a tin mug between your hands, heat radiating through the metal, the steam rising, the comfort settling along your stomach like a glowing coal. You imagine sipping slowly, your breath mixing with the rising steam, your thoughts sharpening with each swallow. Your horse shifts nearby. The movement reminds you of how often night riders shared their coffee with their horses through quiet gestures. Not the drink itself, but the warmth. Cowboys placed their warm hands on the animals' necks or blew warm air near their ears, offering tiny comforts to their four-legged partners. Horses stood through freezing nights without blankets or fire, relying on instinct and their own heavy coats. A human's touch, even a brief one, offered a strange kind of reassurance. You adjust your legs, tucking your knees slightly closer inside the bedroll. The warmth grows richer. You imagine a cowboy sitting cross-legged beside a low fire, mug in hand, coat pulled tight, eyes scanning the herd. The mound of coals glows red like small planets fallen to earth. The silence breaks only by the hiss of bubbling coffee or the occasional tink of metal against the pot. A topic often discussed among frontier scholars drifts into your thoughts. Some believe the coffee ritual bonded cowboys more strongly than any other trail custom. It created shared moments of warmth and conversation in an environment where danger and cold dominated everything else. Others argue that coffee simply kept cowboys awake, its value entirely practical. You feel no need to choose a single explanation. Both seem true in the quiet of this night. You nestle deeper into the blankets as your mind wanders through the ritual step by step. Cowboys did not measure portions. They tossed handfuls of grounds into the pot with a casual confidence. They boiled the mixture until it grew black as tar. Then they poured it into tin cups that burned the edges of their gloves. Some men dropped an eggshell into the brew to settle the grounds. Others let the mixture rest until mud drifted to the bottom. The methods varied endlessly, but the goal never changed. Warmth, energy, focus. You exhale and feel the warmth deepen in your chest, as if the memory itself heats you. The cold outside your roll presses lightly, curious but held at bay by wool and breath. You imagine being awake in the saddle hours later, the coffee still pulsing in your veins. Your horse steps steadily, your senses sharpened. You hear the soft clink of tack, the hush of cattle moving, the faint buzz of night insects. The world feels larger but also clearer. Another story rises, one told by an old trail boss in later years. He said his crew once brewed coffee so strong that a new cowhand swore it kept him awake for 2 days straight. The boss laughed when retelling the memory, claiming the brew could have dissolved a horseshoe if boiled long enough. Exaggeration or not, these stories reveal how deeply coffee anchored the cowboy spirit. You shift again in your bedroll, letting the imagined warmth of that ritual settle gently into your thoughts. Even without a fire, even without a pot or tin cup, you feel steadier. The idea of warmth comforts you almost as much as warmth itself. Your horse gives another soft sigh. The cattle murmur faintly in their sleep. The sky glows with a thin wash of starlight, still and patient. You breathe in, then out, letting the silence settle. Coffee shaped cowboy nights because it offered more than heat. It offered presence, a moment of grounding in a life spent under open skies, fighting cold, distance, exhaustion, and uncertainty. Cowboys carved ritual out of hardship, turning simple acts into anchors. You feel the truth of that now, wrapped tightly in your blankets, drifting slowly toward rest. The cold hovers outside, but inside your roll everything feels steady, safe enough, warm enough. You let your eyelids grow heavier. You breathe in the wool's faint scent. You imagine one last sip of hot, bitter coffee warming your palms and your chest. And with that imaginary heat sliding through your thoughts, you drift back into the quiet rhythm of the night, just as countless riders once did on the frozen trails. You ease deeper into your blankets, letting the lingering warmth of that imagined cup of coffee drift away as your attention shifts towards something softer and more human. Out here, the prairie stretches endlessly, the cold waits without mercy, and danger hangs on the edges of darkness. Yet even in that harsh world, cowboys found moments of quiet companionship, shared warmth. Not always physical, not always spoken, but present in the way men huddled their bedrolls closer, whispered tired jokes into the dark, or simply breathed beside each other in the freezing night. And tonight, in your mind's wandering, you feel that rare closeness settle beside you like an extra layer of insulation. You shift your head slightly on the saddle, and a faint creak lifts into the air. The sound would normally feel lonely, but the soft presence of another cowboy sleeping a few paces away changes the tone entirely. You imagine him adjusting his blanket, pulling it tighter, maybe muttering something half awake. His breath rises in a faint cloud, merging with yours. The cold becomes less personal when someone else is fighting it with you. A detail often mentioned in remembrances of winter drives comes to mind. Cowboys rarely slept right next to each other, but on bitter nights they closed the gaps between their bedrolls, forming loose clusters. The warmth of a nearby body, even a few feet away, softened the edge of the cold. Cattle did the same thing. Horses, too. Survival was a shared act, even if no one admitted it directly. You shift your knee inside your roll and picture a cowboy lying to your left, his hat pulled low, his shoulders hunched inside a tightly wrapped blanket. Another might be on your right, curled into a canvas shell of his own. You feel the imaginary weight of their presence, their breath, their stillness. Out here, closeness carried a sort of silent respect. No one asked for comfort. No one apologized for taking it. A small, curious anecdote drifts into your thoughts. Some cowhands swore that the best nights of sleep happened when 2 or 3 bedrolls were arranged side by side, not touching, but close enough that the shared heat formed a small oasis. They said even the toughest rider would drift into softer dreams when he sensed another man's breathing nearby. It reminded them they were part of a crew, not ghosts wandering the prairie alone. You exhale into your blanket, imagining the subtle warmth that spreads when bodies share an enclosed space, even one as vast as the open range. The cold around you remains, but it feels less hostile. You shift slightly, listening to the faint rustle of wool beside you. You picture one cowboy shifting onto his back, letting out a long sigh that blends with the night. Cowboys talked little about companionship, at least not directly. But the trail demanded a bond that grew quietly through shared hardship. Men rode for hours without speaking, yet felt safer knowing someone else was awake or nearby. They joked through exhaustion, swapped small scraps of food, tightened each other's cinches, and offered the comfort of a simple nod before crawling into their bedrolls. This closeness became especially important on freezing nights, when loneliness could sting as sharply as the cold. You tuck your hands deeper under your blanket and imagine offering part of your wool to the cowboy beside you. He would probably refuse it with a laugh, calling you foolish, but he would still sleep closer. You sense the unspoken gratitude behind the refusal. A debate often appearing in studies of cowboy social life touches your thoughts. Some researchers argue that cowboys forged bonds stronger than most men of their time, born from shared risk and constant hardship. Others claim those bonds remained shallow, limited by pride and the ruggedness of frontier masculinity. Lying here between imagined crewmates, you feel the truth is neither extreme. Bonds formed quietly, indirectly, in subtle gestures and shared warmth. The cowboy to your left shifts again. You hear him mutter something under his breath. A joke, maybe, or a memory slipping into a dream. You respond with a small, sleepy hum, barely deliberate. Even this small exchange feels grounding. The night seems less enormous when another human is close enough for your voice to reach. Your mind travels to another story told on long rides. Cowboys said the cold could twist a man's mood, turning small miseries into heavy burdens. But when they slept close, the weight felt lighter. One rider joked that sleeping 3 feet from his best friend saved him more than a blanket ever did. Whether he meant it sincerely or with rough humor, the idea lingers. You stretch your toes inside your roll. The warmth deepens. You picture one cowboy pulling his blanket tighter and whispering something like, "Cold enough to freeze a shadow tonight." Another might answer, "Shadow froze an hour ago." Simple lines traded in the dark. Not profound, not poetic, but shared. Your horse stands close, silent but present. Horses often formed their own circle of warmth around riders during harsh nights, drifting closer to the cluster of sleeping men. Their body heat added another layer of protection, subtle but real. You imagine the soft thud of hooves as your horse steps near your blanket, the faint rise of steam as it exhales. The cattle breathe slowly. Their breaths lift and fall like a long, shared heartbeat. The cowboy to your right shifts his feet under his blanket, perhaps brushing against the edge of your roll for a moment. That tiny contact feels surprisingly comforting, a confirmation that you are not the only one fighting the cold. You close your eyes halfway. The warmth from inside your roll and the presence of others forms a small pocket of safety. The prairie still stretches out endlessly, but this little cluster feels like a modest, fragile camp inside a vast ocean of frost. You feel part of something now, not a solitary figure pressed against the sky. Another quiet anecdote lingers at the edge of your thoughts. Some riders said they learned more about their crewmates from the way they slept than from any conversation. Who curled tightly, who lay flat, who muttered, who snored, who shifted constantly. Each habit told a story without a single word spoken. You imagine that now, listening. The cowboy to your left snores lightly. The one to your right breathes evenly. Their presence builds a rhythm, steady and familiar. You breathe into the wool again, letting the warmth collect around your mouth and nose. You feel the range soften around you, the cold no longer sharp but distant. You nestle deeper into the blanket. The cluster of bedrolls feels like a small refuge carved out from winter's grasp. And even without touching, even without speaking, you feel the comfort of human company keeping the night at bay. The stars shimmer above. The cattle sigh. Your horse rests near your feet, and wrapped in quiet companionship, you drift gently towards sleep, warmed by the simple truth that survival on the range was never truly solitary. You lie still for a moment, letting the imagined warmth of nearby cowboys fade into a softer, quieter glow inside your mind. The range has settled again. The herd breathes evenly. Your horse stands with quiet patience. And slowly, as your eyelids grow heavier, another layer of the cowboy night unfolds around you, the realm of dreams. Not the polished dreams that fill warm bedrooms and soft mattresses, but the drifting, half-shaped illusions, born from exhaustion, starlight, and the steady hum of the open prairie. Out here, dreams carry grit. They blur with memory. They bleed into reality until a cowboy cannot always tell where sleep begins or ends. You tug your blanket closer and exhale into the wool. The warmth surrounding your face deepens, and everything outside the roll grows softer. The world seems to hush itself as you slip a little further toward the edge of sleep. Cowboys spent so much of their lives riding, watching, waiting, and listening that their dreams often borrowed from the land around them. They dreamed of hoofbeats, of faint cattle calls, of endless grass rippling in imaginary wind. They dreamed of storms still forming over distant hills. Even at rest, the trail followed them. A detail that appears frequently in first-hand winter drive memoirs floats into your thoughts. Cowboys often drifted into dreams, shaped entirely by the sounds around them. A low moan from a steer might become a giant creature in the dream world. The distant cry of coyotes might twist into a warning call from some unseen threat. Sleep offered little escape. It simply rearranged the familiar into strange new shapes. You shift in your role, letting the blanket rustle softly. The noise blends with the gentle hum of the prairie, and you can imagine how a cowboy, drifting half asleep, might mistake the sound of his own blanket for rushing water or distant footsteps. Exhaustion made every sound ambiguous. Cowboys often slept with the feeling that the night stretched into their minds, bending their dreams into the shape of the land. A curious little trail tale settles into your thoughts. Some cowhands claimed that on particularly cold nights, their dreams took on a strange clarity, as if the frost sharpened the edges of their inner world. They described seeing stars reflected on imaginary lakes, hearing voices of people long gone, or feeling phantom warmth from campfires that never existed. Whether these dreams came from cold, fatigue, or imagination hardly mattered. They became part of the cowboy's nightly landscape. You inhale more deeply, drawing warm air into your chest. Your breath softens. You feel your body sinking into the bedroll, the ground beneath you hard but steady. The cold hovers beyond the edges of your blankets, but inside, everything grows gentle. Dreams find easier access in this softened space, weaving themselves from the fragments of your day. Your mind wanders toward the image of a cowboy drifting asleep in the saddle, and how those saddle dreams carried their own flavor. The constant sway of the horse often created floating sensations in sleep, a feeling of endless motion even when the horse stood still. Cowboys described these dreams as long drifting journeys across landscapes that were familiar yet somehow exaggerated. Hills too tall, plains too wide, rivers too bright under the moon. A discussion common among researchers of cowboy folklore slips into your thoughts. Some scholars believe that trail dreams helped cowboys maintain their alertness, training their ears and instincts subconsciously. Others argue that these dreams simply reflected the exhaustion and physical strain of the job, nothing mystical at all. Listening to the steady breaths of cattle now, you feel both explanations holding truth. The mind rarely separates work from rest on the range. You shift slightly, curling your knees closer to your chest. The blankets wrap more snugly around your ribs. Inside this cocoon, your senses tilt toward dream territory. You feel the edge of sleep brush your thoughts like a slow wave. A faint image rises, hoof prints glowing softly on frost. Then another, your horse's breath forming shapes in the moonlight. These images fade, then return, reshaped by imagination. Cowboys often spoke of dreaming about home during winter drives. Warm kitchens, heavy quilts, soft beds, the faces of people waiting far away. These dreams came with a bittersweet feeling. Comfort inside the dream reminded them of what they lacked in waking life. A cowboy might wake with the ghost of warmth still lingering on his skin, only to find frost instead of quilts and endless prairie instead of walls. Yet dreaming of home kept their spirits from wearing thin. You imagine that now. A fleeting vision of a warm room, a crackling stove, the smell of wood, something soft beneath your body. For a moment it feels real. You let the sensation wash through you, gentle and warm. But slowly, the scene fades, replaced by the vastness of the plains. The cold returns to the edge of your awareness. The hardened ground beneath your roll grounds your body back into the present. You breathe again, long and slow. Another kind of dream reaches you, the surreal kind born from pure fatigue. Cowboys sometimes dreamed of absurd things, like cattle flying across the sky or horses speaking human words. A story told around countless chuck wagons repeats itself in your mind. One cowboy claimed he dreamed that a giant steer made entirely of frost walked across the prairie, leaving footprints that glowed like starlight. His friends teased him about it for months. You let a faint smile form behind your blanket. The land itself seemed to mix with the imagination during these winter nights, shaping dreams that lingered long after sunrise. You picture the frost steer now, towering and shimmering, its breath forming clouds that drift across your inner vision. The image fades as gently as it came. You adjust your head on the saddle, feeling the leather's familiar firmness cradle your skull. Your breath falls into a slow rhythm. The cattle's breathing merges with yours. The night sky above becomes a dim blur through half-closed eyes. In this state, you understand how cowboys lived between two worlds, half waking, half dreaming, always listening. Another quiet memory surfaces, something mentioned in several old letters from riders. They said that in the deepest cold, dreams sometimes arrived without warning, slipping in like shadows between breaths. A rider could blink and suddenly find himself drifting in a half-dream, wandering through mental planes filled with shifting shapes. These dreams did not last long, but they left the sleeper oddly soothed, as if the world had paused to let him rest. You begin to feel that same drifting now. Your thoughts move more slowly. Images appear and dissolve before you can grasp them. A faint spark of light. The face of a horse. A moving river that becomes a blanket fold. The prairie glows faintly in your imagination, far brighter than it does in reality. These fragments of dream hover in the quiet beneath your eyelids. You take another breath, warm and steady. Sleep draws closer, soft as the wool around your face. The cold outside remains sharp, but inside your roll everything feels peaceful, safe enough for dreams to drift freely. You let your body soften, your fingers uncurl, your shoulders relax. The realm of dreams steadies its hold on you, weaving your memories of the day into drifting images shaped by starlight and cold. And as you slide gently toward sleep, you understand why cowboys spoke of dreams with such quiet reverence. In a world of endless work and harsh nights, dreams became small lanterns glowing inside the mind, guiding them through shadows until dawn returned. You breathe slowly, letting the last threads of dream settle into the folds of your mind. The warmth inside your bedroll feels steady again, cradling you like a small pocket of shelter carved out of the endless prairie. But as your thoughts drift back toward waking awareness, something else rises around you. It is quiet, soft, and rhythmic, the sound of your horse breathing, a sound so familiar, so steady, that cowboys often relied on it more than any tool or weapon. Tonight you listen with the same instinct those riders carried, letting the horse's breath guide you deeper into a calmer state of rest. You shift your head just enough to angle your ear toward the animal. The saddle creaks beneath your cheek as you adjust. In the stillness, the sound becomes clear. Your horse inhales slowly, deeply, a soft whistle of air through warm nostrils, then a long exhale that forms a faint cloud in the cold. The rhythm repeats, even, calm, constant, a comfort that reaches you in a way warmth alone cannot. A detail often mentioned in old ranch memoirs touches your thoughts. Cowboys relied on their horses as nighttime sentinels. The animals sensed danger more quickly than any human ear could detect. A horse steadied by sleep signaled safety. A horse stiffening or lifting its head signaled trouble. Even half asleep, riders knew how to read these cues. Horses became living barometers of the night. You nestle deeper into your blankets and listen again. Your horse snorts softly, shaking off a bit of frost. Then it settles, placing more weight onto one hind leg, a sign of relaxation. The subtle sounds drift through the dark like gentle notes. The slow rhythm of your horse breathing begins to lull your senses. There is a security in that cadence, something ancient and instinctive. Humans slept beside animals long before the cowboy era. This bond goes deeper than the trail. You breathe in time with your horse for a moment. Your chest rises as the horse inhales. You exhale as it exhales. The synchronization feels soothing, almost as if you are sharing the same pocket of heat around you. Even in the freezing night, you feel a soft thread of warmth connecting your bodies. A small tale commonly shared around chuck wagon fires drifts into your memory. Some cowhands claimed they could predict a predator's approach by the change in a horse's breathing. If the animal exhaled sharply, widened its nostrils, or snapped awake, the rider knew something was moving nearby. They trusted this early warning far more than their own sense of hearing. You imagine listening now for any shift, but nothing changes. Your horse remains calm. You move your hand out from under the blanket just enough to reach toward the animal. The cold clamps onto your fingers instantly, making you wince. But when your fingertips brush your horse's warm shoulder, the sting eases. The animal does not flinch. It simply breathes, steady as the tide. You retreat your hand quickly back into the blankets, letting your fingers regain heat. But the reassurance of that brief touch lingers. You picture how cowboys positioned themselves at night. Many slept with their horses close enough that they could reach out to them in the dark. The warmth of a horse's body, even from a small distance, created a faint rise in temperature around the camp. It was not enough to keep a man warm alone, but it added to the subtle layering of survival. A horse was more than transportation. It was shelter, company, protection. You shift your legs slightly inside your bedroll and listen to the prairie's faint hum returning around you. The cattle breathe in slow waves, forming a distant chorus. But your focus stays on the single steady sound near your head. The rhythm of the horse's breath smooths the edges of your thoughts, grounding you in the moment. A long-running topic among historians of the frontier touches your mind. Some believe cowboys developed a unique emotional bond with their horses because they spent more time with them than any other living beings. Others argue the bond was purely practical, born from necessity. But listening now, wrapped in blankets while your horse stands quietly nearby, the relationship feels deeper than practical. It feels like companionship shaped by cold nights and long miles. You tilt your head again, adjusting the pressure of the saddle beneath your cheek. The leather smells faintly of dust and dried sweat. It carries the memory of the day's ride, the warmth of sunlight long gone. You feel a quiet gratitude for these simple materials that keep you sheltered. But the gratitude you feel toward your horse is different, more personal, more alive. Another small anecdote from cowboy stories rises. Riders often said that horses could dream while standing, their bodies swaying lightly as their minds drifted. Some even made soft huffing noises, or stamped a hoof in their sleep. You listen carefully now. Your horse shifts just a little, as if adjusting its weight. Then it breathes again in that slow, steady rhythm. You wonder if it dreams of running across meadows or following winding trails through canyon country. You pull your blanket closer and feel the warmth return to your shoulder. The cold outside still clings to the edges of your roll, but the steady breath of your horse creates a sense of protection that even wool and canvas cannot match. It is the presence of another living being, awake enough to notice the world, calm enough to let you rest. The chill of the night presses lightly against your cheek again, but your body no longer tightens in response. You let the rhythm soothe you. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The pattern softens your muscles, loosens the tension behind your ribs. You feel the prairie shift around you, settling into its winter posture. You let your thoughts drift to the countless cowboys who slept like this, the ones who trusted their horses more than any watchdog, men who curled in blankets beside the same animal that carried them through storms, rivers, deserts, and thousands of miles of unknown land. You feel connected to them now, sharing the same steady breathing of a horse in the dark. Your eyelids droop, your breath slows, the cattle's quiet murmurs fade to a soft blur. The cold remains outside, patient and distant. The warmth inside your roll grows deeper. The rhythm of your horse becomes softer, more dreamlike. You let your mind sink into that sound, the steady inhale and exhale that promises the night is safe enough to rest. And with the horse keeping silent watch, you drift gently toward sleep, letting the quiet harmony of human and animal carry you into the deeper hours of the frozen night. You breathe in slowly, letting the steady rhythm of your horse fade into the larger quiet of the prairie. Your body feels heavier now, the warmth inside your bedroll forming a soft cocoon around your ribs and legs. But one more challenge waits in this long winter night. Even with blankets, even with shared warmth, even with the calm presence of a trusted horse, cowboys still needed something else to sleep through brutal cold: windbreaks. Simple, improvised, sometimes clumsy, sometimes clever. Anything that could blunt the sharp bite of winter wind could mean the difference between rest and misery. Tonight you imagine yourself building one of these small defenses in the middle of the vast, exposed range. You shift slightly, tucking your shoulders deeper into your blanket. The cold outside remains steady, but without the earlier storm it feels cleaner, clearer. You imagine crawling out of your warm roll earlier in the evening and scanning the land for anything that could help slow the wind. Cowboys did this instinctively. Their eyes searched for even the slightest dip, the smallest shrub, a fallen branch, or a rock no bigger than a saddlebag. Out here, the simplest shapes could turn into shelter. A detail commonly mentioned in the journals of winter trail bosses rises in your memory. Cowboys made windbreaks from whatever stood near them: a twisted sagebrush, a half-rotted log, a cluster of cactus pads thrown together in a thick pile. Even saddles could be positioned to form a small barrier. And if nature offered nothing, they built their own by stacking brush or dragging whatever materials they could gather into a low wall. You shift your cheek on the saddle now, imagining the practical steps. You would first choose your sleeping spot: slightly raised ground, dry, and facing away from the wind. Then you would place your saddle at your head, not just as a pillow, but as a first shield. Its tall back would block wind from your neck and face. You would then gather brush. Not much, just a few handfuls, anything you could find. Even frozen weeds had value. You would pile them on the side where the wind cut hardest. The goal was not a wall, just a disruption, something to break the gusts into smaller, weaker breaths. You run your hand across the blanket near your chin, imagining its edges fluttering in the wind if no barrier were there. You know how quickly warmth disappears when air rushes uninterrupted across a sleeping body. Cowboys experienced this every night. They learned that a small break in the wind mattered more than any heavy layer of cloth. A small, curious story from trail lore floats into your thoughts. Some riders joked that the best windbreak was another cowboy, lying on the windward side, but only if he owed you a favor. This was teasing, of course, but the practical side of the joke was real. Bodies blocked wind better than any pile of brush. On the coldest nights, riders sometimes arranged their bedrolls so they formed a wedge against the gusts, one man taking the brunt while others curled deeper inside the protected space. It was an unspoken act of trust. You shift your legs slightly, letting your toes nestle into a pocket of warmth. The prairie is quiet now, but you can feel how windbreaks shaped sleep on long winter nights. Without them, the cold would slip into every seam of your blankets. With them, even a modest wall softened the world enough to let your body relax. Your mind drifts to the many shapes of windbreaks cowboys built. Some dug shallow trenches and laid their bedrolls in the dip. Others leaned their saddles against fallen logs and curled beneath the slanted shape. Some pushed dried grass into their blankets to add more insulation. A few stretched ponchos over sagebrush, creating flimsy canopies that blocked just enough wind to feel like shelter. You shift your position again in your roll, imagining the wind hitting your back instead of your face. Cowboys aligned their bodies carefully, letting the cold press against the sturdiest parts of their clothing. Thick coats, stiff canvas, and saddle blankets formed a defensive layer. The front of the bedroll became a pocket of warmth, protected by both the windbreak and the cowboy's own curled posture. A discussion that appears in several studies of frontier habits drifts into your mind. Some researchers argue that cowboys learned windbreak construction from observing wildlife, especially how buffalo and mustangs found sheltered positions behind natural contours. Others suggest they inherited these techniques from older military practices passed down by veterans of early frontier campaigns. Perhaps both sources shaped their instincts. Regardless, cowboys adapted quickly, using whatever the land offered. You imagine kneeling beside a clump of brush earlier in the evening, breaking off a few frozen branches and pushing them into the ground at an angle. The branches would not look like much, but angled correctly, they would break the force of the wind, scattering it into softer currents. The cowboy would then set his bedroll behind that barrier, curl his body into a tight shape, and let his breath warm the small air pocket inside the wool. Your horse shuffles softly nearby. You hear its breath, steady and warm. Some cowboys use their horses as natural windbreaks, positioning their bedrolls just behind the animal's hindquarters. The horse's body blocked most of the gusts, and its warmth added to the sleeping space. Horses tolerated this arrangement well, often resting calmly beside their riders. You imagine placing your roll just a little closer now, letting your horse's presence shield the worst of the cold. You pull your blanket up again, imagining how the windbreak would hold back the icy air. The warmth in your roll deepens, your shoulders loosen, your breath slows. And in this quiet moment, you sense how the simple structures built from brush, snow, or saddles held far more meaning than their small size implied. Cowboys learned that comfort did not come from luxury. It came from cleverness, from shaping the land into a modest cradle, from turning scraps into shelter, from trusting the smallest details. You feel this truth settling into your bones. Even the faintest windbreak could turn misery into bearable stillness. It turned freezing nights into tolerable ones, and tolerable nights into restful ones. You imagine yourself leaning against your saddle, hidden from the gusts by a small pile of brush, the cold kept just far enough away that your breath could warm the space in front of your face. You listen again. Your horse breathes. The cattle murmur. The prairie whispers. The night folds gently around your bedroll like a careful hand. You let your eyes soften. Your body grows heavier, anchored by warmth and the sense of shelter. The windbreak in your imagination stands beside you, sturdy in its own humble way, guarding your sleep along with the rhythm of the herd and the watchful calm of your horse. And wrapped in this trio of simple protections, you drift toward deeper rest, knowing that even the sharp winter wind can be softened when a cowboy works with the land instead of fighting it. You rest your cheek more comfortably against the saddle's curve, the leather warmed just enough by your breath and lingering body heat. The night feels steady for the moment, tucked into a long pause between gusts. But as your mind drifts deeper into the quiet, you remember another layer of cowboy life that pressed its way into these winter nights. Not storms, not predators, not icy ground. Something stranger, softer, almost superstitious. The beliefs and whispered traditions cowboys carried, especially in the cold. Out here, when darkness stretched endlessly across the plains and sleep balanced precariously between waking and dreaming, men clung to odd ideas to make sense of the night. You let those stories settle into your thoughts now, as naturally as frost settling on grass. You breathe slowly into your blanket, feeling warmth gather again at your chin. Then you shift slightly, imagining a circle of cowboys huddled close during some earlier winter drive, sharing quiet murmurs that skirted the line between practical and mystical. These were men who trusted their hands, their horses, their instinct. Yet the cold had a way of stirring strange thoughts, and even the toughest riders held on to a few beliefs they never spoke of too loudly. A detail preserved in several old ranch letters floats into your mind. Many cowboys believed the cold carried moods or warnings. If the air tasted metallic just before sunrise, they claimed trouble was near. If frost formed in unusually thick patches around the herd, they saw it as a sign of restless cattle or shifting weather. These observations were not taught, just sensed, passed from one rider to another in quick, quiet phrases. They gave shape to the unpredictable night. You shift under your blanket, feeling the cold brush past your shoulders, and a tiny shiver runs through your body. That subtle move reminds you of another odd belief. Cowboys sometimes said that a sudden shiver in deep cold meant someone was thinking about you, even from far away. It was a gentle idea in a harsh world, a thread of connection carried across frozen miles. You imagine a rider muttering this half-awake, half-joking sentiment into the dark, uncertain whether he meant it or not. The cowboy to your left in your imagined camp might shift and whisper something like, "Cold's talking tonight." Statements like that held layers. The cold did talk out here, in ways that had nothing to do with words. It shaped the way breath moved. It altered the sounds of the herd. It tuned the land like an instrument. Another quiet story surfaces, especially common in crews that rode through Montana and Wyoming winters. Some riders believed that certain stars burned brighter when extreme cold was about to hit, as if the sky itself warned them. Others said the opposite. Fading stars signaled rough patches ahead. Men debated these ideas over tin cups of coffee, never fully agreeing, never fully dismissing each other. You can imagine them nudging one another awake and pointing toward a cluster of icy lights, whispering predictions only the night could judge. You tighten your blanket around your chest as something else pricks your memory. A belief rooted in old cattle traditions. Riders claimed cows could sense omens better than people. If a cow rose suddenly after long hours of resting, or if a cluster of them faced the same direction, cowboys would watch the horizon. Maybe a predator lurked. Maybe a cold front approached. Maybe nothing at all. But the belief offered comfort. When the land felt too big, the instinct of animals grounded them. Your horse shifts again, exhaling a warm plume into the air. You listen to that breath and recall another soft superstition. Some cowhands said horses saw spirits along the trail on winter nights, pausing or flicking their ears at things humans could not perceive. This idea rarely made its way into daylight conversations, but at night, when the prairie pressed in and the stars shone too sharply, the thought lingered at the edge of the mind. You slide your hand slightly under your chin, feeling the blanket's texture press gently against your skin. These superstitions were never meant to frighten. They offered explanations when logic felt too thin. In the cold, imagination warmed the mind, the way wool warmed the body. A long-running debate among researchers of frontier culture slips into your thoughts. Some believe these beliefs came directly from older folk traditions carried westward by settlers. Others argue they emerged naturally from isolation, cold, and constant exposure to nature's unpredictability. Both ideas feel plausible as the night hums softly around you. You shift your legs inside the bedroll, letting them curl closer for warmth. Then another fragment of winter lore rises. Some cowboys believed that breathing a certain way at night helped keep warmth near the heart. Slow breaths, deep breaths. Not because of science, but because they imagined each breath feeding a small glow inside the chest. Whether this glow represented courage, luck, or simple determination varied from rider to rider. You try that rhythm now, inhaling deeply, exhaling slowly. It brings a calmness you cannot deny. Another story drifts forward, light as drifting frost. One cowboy said that if he saw frost forming in perfect crystals on his hat brim, it meant the night would stay quiet. If it formed in uneven patches, something might disturb the herd. No one could prove him right or wrong, but for years his crewmates kept an eye on their own hats when the temperature dropped. You imagine touching the brim of your own hat now. Frost gathers softly, evenly, a good sign if you choose to believe it. You breathe into your blanket again, warming the air near your lips. Then your thoughts drift to a gentle superstition held by many trail hands. If a rider talked softly to his horse before sleeping, murmured a few grounding words, the animal slept better and stayed calmer through the night. Cowboys understood the emotional weight of these connections long before anyone studied them. You whisper a quiet phrase toward your horse, letting the sound dissolve into the air. The animal shifts slightly, then settles. Another belief surfaces, a quieter one. Some cowboys said the land itself remembered kindness. If you treated the earth gently, chose your footprint with care, the prairie eased your sleep. If you disrespected it, the ground felt colder, the wind harsher. No one argued this out loud, but many acted as if it were true, moving thoughtfully across the range. You feel the truth of that in your own posture now. You relax your shoulders. You settle gently into the canvas beneath you. You breathe in and out, slow and patient, as if letting the land know you belong here peacefully. The night around you grows warmer in its stillness. Your horse breathes calmly. The herd murmurs in steady rhythm. And these old superstitions, these small pieces of cowboy lore, weave themselves around you like extra layers of insulation. Not literal warmth, but warmth of the mind. And sometimes that was enough. You let your eyes drift half closed. You nestle deeper into the blankets. The cold remains, but its edge has softened. The prairie feels less empty, more familiar, filled with breath, belief, and small comforts shared across generations. And wrapped in this gentle blend of warmth and old winter wisdom, you sink once more into the slow, drifting current of sleep. You breathe slowly into the warmth of your blanket, feeling the comfort of those whispered superstitions fade into the deeper truth of nights on the open range. Because beneath the stories, beneath the quiet myths shared around fires or murmured from one bedroll to another, cowboy sleep in brutal winter came down to something far sharper: survival. Not the romantic kind sung about in ballads, but the simple, unadorned fact that sleep itself could be dangerous if not handled correctly. Tonight, with the cold lying thick across the earth and the prairie stretching wide and silent, you feel the weight of that reality pressing softly at the edge of your awareness. You shift slightly inside your roll, letting the buffalo lining brushed against your cheek warm again from your breath. Out here, lying under the stars, sleep was never guaranteed. It had to be earned, managed, protected. A moment of carelessness could cost fingers, toes, even the strength needed to ride at dawn. Every cowboy understood that rest was not a luxury. It was a requirement for staying alive. A detail often preserved in old drive reports floats into your thoughts. Trail bosses warned their men not to fall asleep too deeply in extreme cold. The body slowed too much. Breathing thinned. And if a rider had wet socks or boots, he might wake with frozen toes. Men were told to wake themselves periodically, shift their limbs, and test their fingers for sensation. You imagine doing that now, lifting one hand out from under your blanket for a second. The cold hits fast and sharp. You bring the hand back quickly and rub warmth into it. You breathe into the wool again and feel the air soften. Cowboys learned hundreds of small tricks that kept cold from creeping too far. They warmed their hands under armpits. They placed their feet close to each other to share heat through boot leather. They curled their bodies into tight shapes to conserve energy. Everything was done with purpose, guided by the knowledge that sleep, if mishandled, could become a silent enemy. A quiet anecdote from trail tradition surfaces. One experienced rider told younger cowhands to never sleep with their faces fully exposed in freezing wind. He said the cold stole breath too quickly. Men laughed at him at first, but as the winter progressed, more and more cowboys tucked their blankets up to their chins, believing a small act might save them from waking with frostbitten skin. You follow that advice now, pulling your blanket so close that only the tip of your nose touches the outside air. You shift your legs inside the roll. The warmth spreads through your knees and thighs. Cowboys depended on this heat more than any fire. A good bedroll, positioned correctly, made the difference between waking stiff or waking unable to move at all. You press your ankles together beneath the blanket and feel a pulse of warmth flow between them. A debate often mentioned in frontier writings enters your thoughts. Some believe cowboys grew so accustomed to harsh nights that their bodies adapted to sleep in small, scattered bursts instead of long stretches. Others argue that sleep deprivation was simply part of the job, endured but never mastered. Listening to your own slow breath now, you feel the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Cowboys slept in fragments, drifting repeatedly into half-rest and shallow dreams, piecing together enough recovery to survive. Your horse snorts softly, the warm sound drifting close. You turn your head slightly, listening for any sign of danger. Nothing stirs. The herd rests. The prairie breathes its slow winter rhythm. Even so, you sense the fragility of this peace. A single restless steer could undo everything. A sudden shift in wind could steal your warmth. A frozen toe could make mounting a horse impossible in the morning. Everything in this landscape feels balanced between stability and threat. You shift your shoulders again, careful not to let cold slip into the bedroll. Cowboys moved intentionally during cold nights. They never tossed or stretched suddenly. They adjusted with small motions, preserving warmth like an ember in fragile tinder. You follow this pattern now. You adjust your hips slightly. You pull the blanket closer around your spine. You let the heat gather again. Another fragment from cowboy memory drifts into your thought. Riders on winter drives sometimes slept with their hats tucked under their blankets, not to keep them warm, but because frost forming inside the crown made the hat unbearably stiff by morning. A frozen hat brim cut into the forehead like a blade. Men learned quickly to protect every piece of gear that touched their bodies. Sleep was not just about protecting flesh, but protecting the tools that made survival possible. You breathe again, softly, letting the air warm the wool. Then you picture something more dire. The rare moments when cowboys were forced to stay awake through entire nights because the cold grew too dangerous for sleep. They walked in circles. They slapped their arms. They hummed low tunes to keep themselves from drifting into stillness. These nights became stories told for decades afterward, spoken with the sort of quiet pride men earn by refusing to let the cold claim them. You pull your knees closer, settling into the growing warmth. Your mind drifts to those cowhands who survived winter by embracing the smallest victories. Feeling sensation return to fingertips after a long watch. Waking to discover toes still flexible. Finding a patch of dry ground beneath a drift. Catching just enough rest to keep riding the next day. The world measured comfort in inches, not miles. Your horse breathes again, steady and close. You listen deeply. Cowboys trusted that steady rhythm as reassurance that they had arranged their sleeping spot correctly and that the night had not shifted into danger. Even now you rely on it. The sound keeps the dark from feeling too wide. You let your breath sink with the horse once more. The rhythm softens your thoughts. Your eyelids grow heavier. The warmth near your chest grows richer. The cold remains outside, but you have shaped your small shelter well enough to keep it at bay. And in this fragile, flickering balance between warmth and winter, between sleep and vigilance, you understand more clearly how cowboys rested through brutal cold. They did not conquer the night. They cooperated with it. They matched its stillness. They carved small spaces of survival into an unforgiving world. Wrapped in this careful understanding, you drift again toward rest, your breath warming the wool, the night breathing around you, and survival woven into every quiet second of sleep. You breathe deeper now, feeling the steady rise and fall of your chest as the night settles into a softer quiet. The warmth inside your blanket holds firm, and for a moment the cold outside feels like a distant force, patient but no longer pressing. And as your mind drifts, a different kind of memory begins to take shape, one that cowboys carried with a mixture of longing and disbelief. The rare nights when they were not out on the range at all. The rare moments when winter swallowed the prairie so deeply that a crew took shelter at a homestead, a real roof, real walls, a wooden floor instead of frozen earth. Even if you have never lived that life, you feel the strange weight of that shift settling around you now. You pull the blanket closer around your chin, imagining stepping off your horse after days on the trail, boots stiff with frost, wool soaked or hardened, and seeing a lantern glowing through a cabin window, the shock of warmth at the doorway, the smell of cooked food drifting into the night. These memories stood out in cowboy recollections with a kind of reverence, because they interrupted a world where cold dominated every hour. A detail often mentioned in winter drive journals floats gently into your thoughts. Cowboys rarely visited homesteads, but during blizzards or blistering cold spells, ranch families sometimes opened their doors to passing riders. The men would shuffle inside awkwardly, stamping frost from their boots, hat brims dripping ice onto the floor. They always apologized, always said they did not want to trouble anyone, but the relief in their eyes told another story. You shift your cheek on the saddle, letting your imagination deepen further. Inside a cabin, warmth settled differently. It came from a stove radiating heat in slow waves. It came from walls that blocked the wind. It came from light flickering across wooden beams. A cowboy might sit on a bench near the fire, hands stretched toward the heat, feeling blood return to his fingertips with small stings. Even now you can feel that phantom sting as you nestle deeper into your blanket. A curious story from old ranch families surfaces. Some said the cowboys looked younger when they slept inside a house, as if warm walls aged them backward for a night. Their faces softened, their hands unclenched, their breathing deepened. One ranch wife claimed she once saw a trail hand fall asleep sitting upright by the stove, still wearing his hat, his gloves, everything. Exhaustion and relief tangled together until he drifted instantly into rest. You picture that moment now. A cowboy leaning near the warmth, boots leaving melting puddles on the floor, wool steaming slightly, the heat pulling the cold from his bones like a slow, gentle tug. You can almost hear the stove crackle. You might even feel the wooden boards under your body instead of frozen dirt. You shift your legs inside the roll, sensing the difference. Here, on the prairie, your warmth comes only from your own body, your blankets, and the motionless stillness you create. But in a homestead, warmth came generously, offered without struggle. A cowboy could close his eyes without fear of frost creeping into his bones. Sleep was still light, still aware, but softer, deeper. A lingering point of discussion among historians creeps into your thoughts. Some believe cowboys felt out of place in warm homes, restless under roofs, uneasy without wind on their faces. Others insist they treasured these nights like small miracles. Reading old accounts, you sense both truths. They were grateful, but they also belonged to the open land, and any shelter that felt too permanent created an odd discomfort. You imagine lying in a homestead bunk, wrapped in thick quilts instead of buffalo-lined blankets. The mattress would feel almost decadent compared to hard earth. The warmth would reach your back without you needing to curl, without you needing to breathe warmth into the fabric. You stretch your toes inside your roll as if testing a softness that exists only in memory. You picture the cowboys spread across a small cabin, sleeping in corners, on benches, even on the floor near the stove, their hats hung on pegs, their saddles leaning against doorframes, the air filled with the quiet hum of men finally resting after endless nights in the cold. The ranch family might sleep in another room, leaving the fire banked low to last until morning. Another gentle anecdote drifts in. One cowboy recalled waking in the middle of the night during a homestead stay, confused by the absence of stars above him. He said it took him a full minute to realize he was looking at a ceiling. His mind, trained by weeks on the prairie, could not understand warmth without sky. You imagine that feeling now, the disorientation of seeing wooden beams instead of constellations. You tighten your blanket as your thoughts drift deeper. In those rare homestead nights, cowboys often slept longer than usual. Their bodies, relieved by warmth and protected from wind, released tension slowly, muscles unwound, joints unlocked. But even then, a part of them remained attuned to the herd, to the trail, to the habit of sleeping lightly. No roof could erase the instincts built on countless nights under open sky. You picture the contrast between that memory and your current place on the cold ground. Here, your bedroll holds your warmth. The air around you is cold enough to bite. The stars stretch overhead. Your breath fogs. And yet, this feels right. This feels familiar. You sense the truth that cowboys felt as well. Comfort was precious but temporary. The open range called them back, again and again. You breathe again, slow and warm, and your mind returns to the moments after leaving a homestead. Cowboys often stepped out at dawn, the cold rushing back into their faces like a slap. They felt the weight of the trail again, the distance stretching ahead, but they carried the memory of warmth with them, tucked somewhere deep inside. A reminder that even in the harshest winters, humanity still offered shelter. You feel that same mix of gratitude and realism now. If you imagine rising from your roll and stepping into a cabin tonight, you might relish the warmth. But you would also feel a pull back to the prairie, to the rhythm of wind and cattle and stars. Both worlds coexist in your thoughts. You let your breath settle. The warmth inside your roll holds. The cold stays outside. And you drift between these worlds, understanding why even a single night under a real roof felt like a blessing. But understanding, too, why cowboys always returned to the open land, trusting that if they could survive the cold would teach them how to belong. Wrapped in that understanding, you sink gently back towards sleep, the memory of warm cabins softening the edges of the bitter prairie night. You breathe deeply, letting the imagined warmth of that rare homestead night fade, and the wild prairie settle fully back around you. The stars glimmer with a calm steadiness now. Your bedroll holds its warmth. The cold has become a familiar companion instead of a threat. And as you lie there, wrapped in the quiet rhythm of the herd and the slow breath of your horse, your thoughts turn toward another source of knowledge that shaped a cowboy's winter sleep: the old hands, the seasoned riders, the men who had survived more winters than they cared to count, and whose quiet habits revealed lessons no book or trail boss could teach outright. You adjust your cheek against the saddle, letting the leather mold softly to your skin. Then you imagine one of those old cowboys settling into his bedroll a few paces away. His blanket would be patched in places, his saddle worn smooth, his movements slow but deliberate. Cowboys joked that the older men seemed carved from the land itself, as if winter had shaped them, the same way wind shaped canyon walls. Watching them settle for the night taught younger riders more than any lecture ever could. A detail preserved in many early trail accounts floats across your thoughts. Older cowhands rarely complained about the cold. They addressed it, respected it, studied it. If the wind rose, they turned their bedrolls without hesitation. If frost thickened faster than expected, they tightened their blankets hours earlier. They listened to the land with a kind of patience that younger men only gained through experience or misery. You shift your shoulders slightly, mimicking the slow adjustments those seasoned riders made. Their motions were subtle, almost invisible, a small tuck of the blanket edge, a gentle roll of the shoulder to trap more warmth, a way of curling that minimized cold points where air could sneak inside. To the untrained eye, it looked effortless, but each gesture was sharpened by dozens of winters, hundreds of nights, and endless hours spent fighting cold with little more than wool and instinct. A curious little memory from frontier letters drifts into your mind. Some cowboys said that you could always tell who had survived the worst winters by the way they watched the sky before bed. The old hands studied the stars, the way the air smelled, the behavior of the horses, even the faint sting on the inside of their noses. They predicted the night's coldness with uncanny accuracy. Younger riders laughed until they discovered, again and again, that the predictions always came true. You breathe slowly, imagining such a rider glancing upward now. His eyes would move from star to star, gauging brightness, then to the ground, watching frost gather on a rope coil, then to the herd, noticing how tightly the cattle grouped or how loosely they spread. Each detail whispered its own message, and he knew how to read everyone. You shift your feet deeper into the warm pocket inside the roll, sensing how these elders taught through example. They rarely lectured, they rarely corrected openly, but they showed, they demonstrated, and younger cowboys absorbed their lessons in the quiet moments between cold breaths. Another story drifts through your thoughts. A young cowhand once asked an older rider how he slept through the worst northern winds. The old man simply replied, "By knowing what I can fix and ignoring what I can't." That phrase lingered for generations. Cowboys learned that surviving winter meant preparing for what they could control. Blankets positioned right, windbreaks set properly, body curled efficiently, and accepting the cold that simply could not be fought. You sense the truth of that in your own posture now. The cold still presses outside your bedroll, but you no longer tense against it. The warmth inside your blanket stays steady because you have tucked yourself well, sealed every small gap. You worked with the cold instead of fearing it. This quiet cooperation was exactly what the old hands taught. Your horse breathes near your feet, and the rhythm blends with your heartbeat. You imagine an elder cowboy noticing the same sound. He would position his bedroll not for sentiment, but because the horse's calmness signaled safety. The seasoned riders were attuned to even the smallest shifts. If a horse stiffened, they woke instantly. If a cow rose abruptly from sleep, they listened. If the wind dropped too suddenly, they adjusted. You absorb that awareness now, letting your senses skim across the darkness without reaching too far. You adjust your chin in the blanket again, feeling the warmth grow richer. The old hands often slept with astonishing stillness. They knew how to conserve heat with quiet discipline. They kept their breathing slow and their bodies compact. Some riders claimed these men slept like hibernating animals, gathering what little warmth remained and distributing it evenly through their bodies. You try to mimic that now. You inhale deeply, hold, exhale slowly. The rhythm steadies you. Your muscles loosen. Your thoughts soften. The old hands believed that calmness itself created warmth. Panic leaked heat. Stillness preserved it. A discussion among frontier historians slips into your thoughts. Some argue that the wisdom of these seasoned cowboys came from older cultural traditions blended quietly into ranch life. Others believe the knowledge emerged entirely from long exposure to harsh winters and hard living. Whatever its origin, the wisdom endured. You imagine one of these old riders stirring slightly in his roll, perhaps shifting his knees or repositioning his shoulder. He says nothing. He knows you are watching. He knows you are learning. On the range, teaching often happened in silence. You curl your toes under the blanket again. The warmth spreads gently. You think of another insight the seasoned cowboys passed down: conserving energy. They never wasted heat by lifting blankets too far or letting cold reach their backs. They prepared every night as if expecting the worst, and most nights rewarded their caution. Another anecdote returns. One old trailhand once told his crew that the cold was only half the problem. The other half was pride. Men who refused to adapt, who insisted on fighting the cold instead of working with it, were the ones who suffered most. Adaptation mattered more than toughness. Flexibility more than bravado. You feel that lesson as you shift gently into a slightly warmer position, listening to your own breath. The herd rustles faintly. It is a peaceful sound, a steady one, the kind that seasoned riders loved. They said a calm herd meant the cowboy could sleep without fear, at least for a little while. You feel that same sense of permission now, a small pocket of peace carved into the cold. You inhale again. The night around you feels less threatening, more familiar. The cold still surrounds you, but the wisdom of countless winters presses softly at your side, like an invisible companion. And wrapped in that quiet legacy of resilience and adaptation, you drift gently towards sleep, learning with each breath how the old hands survived the cold, and how their lessons still guide you through the frozen hours of the night. You breathe in softly, letting the lessons of the old hands settle through your mind like slow-falling snow. The night has grown gentler now. The storm is gone. The prairie lies quiet and pale beneath the sky. Your bedroll holds its warmth, shaping itself around your shoulders in a comforting cradle. And as you lie there, your thoughts drift toward the moment every cowboy knew so well, waking on the final morning of a long, freezing night. That slow, reluctant rise from warmth into cold air. That familiar stiffness settling into joints. That fragile hope that daylight will bring enough sun to loosen the body again. Tonight, you imagine that moment with a clarity that feels almost real. You shift gently in your roll, sensing the warmth you fought so long to create. The blanket, heavy with trapped heat, clings to your chest. The buffalo lining brushes your neck. Your breath gathers as a soft cloud inside the wool. But you know that soon you will have to face morning. Cowboys knew it too. No matter how cold the night, sunrise demanded movement. A detail often recorded in winter drive recollections drifts into your thoughts. Cowboys rarely woke suddenly. They rose in slow stages, letting their minds surface before their bodies. First came awareness. The cold pressing lightly against the edges of the blanket. The stiffness waiting beneath the knees. The faint ache in shoulders that spent hours curled against frost. Then came the mental negotiation. The acknowledgement that warmth would vanish the moment the blanket shifted. You feel that debate now. You move one finger outside the blanket, testing the air. The cold grips it immediately, sharp, unforgiving. You retreat the finger back into the warmth, cradling it under your chin. This was the first struggle of every winter morning. Leave the cocoon too soon and lose the only heat you earned. Stay too long and risk falling behind in morning work. Cowboys balanced this moment with a weary acceptance. Your horse shifts a few steps away, shaking a light dusting of frost from its coat. The sound echoes through the quiet. You listen closely. The animal's breath comes in steady plumes, signaling calm. Cowboys often judged the morning by how their horses woke. A relaxed horse meant the night had passed safely. A tense one meant something had jarred it during the dark. You feel your own shoulders tighten with the same old caution. Even while waking, cowboys remained half alert. They checked the herd with sleepy glances, listening for restless movement. They took in the sky, gauging cloud cover, frost brightness, and wind. Morning was not just a return to work. It was a new assessment of survival. A small, curious story rises from your memory of trail lore. Some cowboys claimed the coldest part of the entire night came moments before dawn. They said you could feel the world hold its breath before the first traces of light appeared. Whether it was true or not, many riders woke at this exact moment, shivering as if nudged awake by the cold itself. You pull your blanket closer now, imagining that thin line between night and sunrise. You breathe deeper, slowly, letting warmth settle into your lungs. Then you imagine pulling the blanket just an inch away from your face. The cold rushes in like a whisper, sharp enough to make your eyes blink. Cowboys often describe that first bite of morning chill as a test, a reminder that comfort was temporary and work waited. You shift again, curling your toes inside your warm socks. Your feet feel stiff but responsive. Another detail preserved in winter recollections comes to mind. Cowboys always checked their toes first. Wiggle them, flex them, make sure they still warmed quickly. Frostbite was not always dramatic. Sometimes it crept in quietly. A numb toe could become a dead toe by sunset if ignored. You wiggle yours now, relieved by the warmth. Your horse exhales again, steady and patient. You imagine rising from your bedroll, brushing frost from your hat, and placing your gloved hand against the animal's warm neck. Cowboys did this instinctively. It grounded them. It reminded them that they were not alone in the cold. The horse had endured the same night. Together, they would endure the day ahead. A long-standing discussion among frontier writers touches your thoughts. Some say cowboys dreaded winter mornings more than any other part of trail life. Others insist those mornings felt strangely invigorating, as if the cold sharpened their senses and pushed them into motion. You can feel both sides in yourself now. The reluctance to leave warmth. The small excitement of knowing dawn brings new movement, new warmth from work and riding. You imagine throwing your blanket aside with quick efficiency, letting the cold flood your skin. The shock would be immediate. A sting across your shoulders, a bite at your ankles. The kind of cold that makes you inhale sharply. But cowboys learned to use that shock, turning it into motion rather than misery. They rose quickly, rolled their blankets tight before frost could set in, and strapped the roll to the saddle. You shift slightly again, feeling your bedroll's warmth begin to thin as you picture the morning steps. Shake off frost, stretch stiff joints, stamp feet to bring blood back, brush off the horse's mane, check the hooves, look over the herd. Everything done methodically, even with frozen fingers and half-opened eyes. You exhale softly into the wool. For now, you do not rise. You are still in the warmth of night, still resting, still wrapped in the sheltered quiet the prairie rarely offered. But you feel the pull of morning on the horizon, a faint, invisible change in the sky. The cold thickens slightly, as if reminding you the night is ending. This is the moment cowboys learn to savor. The final stretch of warmth before the day demanded movement. The last gentle breath before coffee boiled, saddles creaked, and frost cracked beneath boots. You feel the weight of that moment now, deep and quiet. Your breath slows, your heartbeat steadies, the prairie hums with a soft stillness, and you lie there, poised between night's last warmth and the promise of dawn, knowing these final minutes carry a peace no cowboy ever forgot. You breathe more slowly now, letting the cold soften and the quiet deepen. The night around you feels gentler than before, as if the prairie itself has settled into a long, drowsy sigh. Your blankets cradle your body, your breath warms the small space in front of your lips, and the world grows quieter with every passing moment. No urgency, no frost biting at your skin, just the slow melt of tension leaving your shoulders. Imagine the sky beginning to pale, not brightening but dimming into a softer shade of night. The stars stretch into long, lazy points of light, drifting quietly in the freezing air. Your horse stands nearby, still and patient, its breath rising in slow curls that fade before they reach your face. The cattle breathe in a wide, steady rhythm, each exhale blending into the next like waves rolling across a distant shoreline. You relax your hands, your fingers loosen. The ground beneath you no longer feels cold, just solid and familiar, holding your body gently as if inviting you to rest a little longer. The air moves around you in soft currents, brushing lightly against your cheek in a way that feels almost tender. Every detail of the range grows faint now. The frozen earth, the distant hills, the long shadows stretching across the grass. They all soften, fading into a quiet blur. What remains is warmth, breath, stillness, and the gentle rhythm of a night that asks nothing more from you. Let yourself drift now. Let the cold stay outside, kept at bay by your blankets and the memory of all the small comforts that carried you through the night. Feel the softness inside your chest, the calmness in your breath, and the slow unraveling of thought. Sleep comes easily here,